Welcome everybody to the fourth quarter Milwaukee Tableau user group meeting. This is the third meeting that we've had virtually this year. So welcome, thanks for joining us. We have a great agenda for today, but before I talk through the agenda, I just want to briefly introduce the group itself and what our mission is. So I think a user group of any kind, really, our goal is to bring together like-minded people. So we're all interested in Tableau. So let's get together. We can talk about maybe challenges we're facing, solutions we've found, just generally networking with one another and learning from one another. I think we all bring different perspectives to the table. So, I know I'm a server administrator and I have that kind of perspective, but then there's other people maybe who are people who develop in Tableau desktop and share their creations with others. And so we all have different perspectives, and we can, I think by bringing those to the table, it makes us all stronger. So I guess that's just another benefit for a user group. And then, we always have fun. Typically, if you've come to a Milwaukee user group, Tableau user group meeting in the past, we usually follow up every meeting with a happy hour. We are doing a virtual happy hour, so BYOB, but I sent out a reminder email yesterday, and that should have had a link to the happy hour that is going to be after this. So it's actually a separate Zoom meeting. So this one will end at 4 o'clock, and then I'll start up the happy hour Zoom meeting. So find that link, and then I'll also post it in the chat window later as well. So, but keep an eye out for that, and that'll just be an opportunity to network and just chat with other people. So that is what the user group is about. The agenda for today. So we've kicked off our meeting. I'm going to go through a few introductions of your leadership team, the folks who put together these meetings, and then we're going to actually poll the audience to learn a little bit more about you guys. So that'll come up in just a moment. And then our first presentation of the day is one titled Modern Data Architecture. So we have a few local people who will be discussing, what their modern data architecture looks like and how Tableau fits into that. And then after their presentation, we'll take a quick break. We know it's a long meeting, so we want to give everybody an opportunity to, get a drink of water, or take care of, a few emails or whatever that looks like. After our break, we're going to do a hiring manager panel. So this is all folks that, manage analytics teams, and just we're going to just ask them a variety of questions. So if you have questions for any of our presenters or panelists, feel free to start thinking about those, and we'll be putting those into the Q&A panel within Zoom. So if you missed it, I did mention that there's a difference between the chat window, where that's kind of more of just like fun commentary, and the Q&A panel. So if you have a question, use the Q&A panel, and that's what we're going to be selecting random winners from the people who ask questions, and they're going to win swag at the end of our meeting. So Q&A panel is where it's at. But after our panel, we have a wonderful speaker who's going to be showing us how to build a resume in Tableau. So may not be a use case of Tableau that you've maybe thought of before, but she's accomplished it, and we'll be sharing how she did that. So that will be Ann Jackson speaking to us a little bit later. And then, yeah, we're going to just wrap up our meeting and get on to the drinks. So that's the agenda for today. Hopefully y'all are as excited as I am. So who am I? My name is Brandy Beals. That's me. I help to lead the Milwaukee Tableau user group along with my fantastic team of Patrick and Olga and Crystal and Josh. So Josh is the only lame-o who couldn't be here today. So, I can pick on him because he's not here to defend himself. So that's how it goes, I guess. But we help to put together, the meetings that you've hopefully come to enjoy. But let's get to know a little bit more about you. So if you've been to one of our meetings before, you know that we like to use this polling software. And we're going to ask that you go to this fantastic URL. It's pretty, you know, horrible, but it is case sensitive, so be aware of that. Or what you can do is hold your cameras, like if you open up your camera on your phone and point it at this, usually a little banner pops up, and you can click that and it'll take you right to the poll. Hopefully that makes sense. All right, so same dealio, just going on to the actual screen. I'm gonna post this link also in the chat window, so you can click on that, and we're gonna kick off the poll here in just a second. Does everybody have it? Hopefully. Yeah, all right. You ready, Crystal? All
right. I'm ready.
Yay.
All right, so we're wondering, last week was the 2020 Tableau conference-ish. Obviously, it was a virtual conference last week. So we're just wondering how many people actually participated in that, or if you didn't participate, if you plan to watch on-demand videos. I didn't really get a chance to watch any of it, so I've already flagged the videos I want to watch in the coming weeks. It's like a lot of you did participate though, so that's awesome. All right, so I think we've talked about this idea a few times, so we're actually curious to know how many of you would be interested in joining a data book club with us. Oh man.
It's an even race.
I know. Oh, the no's are, oh.
Come on, yeses. It's like you're either like really into it, like definitely, or like no.
Yeah, there's no middle ground here. You're either like super into it or you're definitely not. Well, awesome. Well, I think we'll be talking a little bit more about that later then, for those of you who are interested. All right, so we've already started talking about what we want to do in 2021 for our meetings. So we're curious to hear from you all what you'd like to see in 2021. We have a lot of options here. If you have any suggestions, feel free to email us. If there's specific things that are not on this list that you want to let us know about that you'd be interested in seeing, please let us know. We try to cater the feedback to what people want to see, and we want to make this as useful for you guys. So help us plan.
I love this. I feel like we're going to have so many good ideas.
I know.
So, thank you. And somebody asked, so just briefly, I feel like people have to like read through this long list, you know, and select the ones that they are interested in. So while the answers roll in, somebody did ask, what is Data Science Book Club or a Data Book Club? It's just an idea I think that we as a leadership team are throwing around, just, you know, maybe for those who are interested in a book club, we pick a book that's like related to, you know, data. I feel like without fail at the Tableau conference, I walk away with like 8 new books. So, you know, we'll pick a book and we'll all just kind of read it in our, you know, own time, but like maybe we'll have meetings like once a week or every 2 weeks or something like that for a month, and just discuss the contents of the book. So nothing too earth-shattering, but just, you know, a few short meetings to just motivate each other to read a book, I guess.
I usually need motivation to read a book, so this is good for me.
Awesome.
All right, looks like we have some good ideas, so thanks everyone. All right, so later on we're going to be talking with Anne about how to make a resume in Tableau, so we're curious how many people have created one or are currently working on one. And we didn't give you an option to just not be interested, so. Looks like we got 1 yes and 1 person working on it. Oh, 2 yeses. Awesome. All right, so I think last meeting we asked the group who was interested in a certification study group. So this question's directed at you if you were interested in that. We're trying to plan out when we want to start something up for this. So which month worked best for you to participate in this kind of study group? Looks like February, January.
And if you're not interested, you can just pick any month. We're not going to hold you to it. We don't know who's answering what question.
All right, looks like February, January are the top selections here. All right, the next question is, have you heard of Matillion? I think that's how you pronounce it. Clearly, I've not heard of it. Looks like I am not the only one, so that makes me feel better. I think we'll be hearing a little bit about it in a few minutes with one of our presenters. So this is good to know. All right, and then what ETL or data prep tools are commonly used in your organization? So, spoiler that Matillion is a ETL data prep tool. We also have Alteryx, Talent, Informatica, SSIS. You're not sure what your company uses, or looks like a lot of people are choosing other. Maybe throw into the chat what you're using. Looks like a lot of others in Alteryx. All right, and so since a lot of us are working from home, this is just a fun little question of what kind of Zoomer you are. So are you the one who's not keeping your camera on? Are you always the one that has the fun, cool backgrounds? I'm often the last one, so I'm actually surprised my dogs are not being annoying right now, because normally when I'm on, they are. Looks like a lot of people are the ones without the camera on. Don't have a lot of talkers, it looks like. All right. Well, thanks everyone for participating in our poll. We always like hearing from you all to find out who's all in our audience.
Absolutely. Thank you, Crystal. I'm definitely the one asking the dog to be quiet, so I apologize if I have to do that through this meeting. All right, so now that we've learned a little bit about you, we're going to move on to our first presentation of the day, which is about our modern data architecture. So I'm going to turn it over to Jorel in just a moment, and then Mark will also be speaking. So Jorel works for Pandata, and they're anchored in Madison, Wisconsin. So we're lucky to have them as part of the Milwaukee user group today. And they're specialists committed to supporting data platform initiatives with a customer experience centric approach. So based on simplicity and right sizing. So if you have any questions around, or just want to maybe a second opinion around your, your data platform, definitely reach out to Jorel. They're sponsoring some of the swag that we're giving away later today. So thank you so much. Following Jorel will be Mark. So Mark has been, a common face that you've seen around the Milwaukee Tableau user group. He's an accomplished data and analytics leader with over 20 years of diverse data, business, industry, and technology experience. So he's very much a hands-on architect and engineer with a variety. I could read off everything that he does, but he has experience with cloud-based data management, ETL, and business intelligence platforms. I know I personally have learned a lot from him, so I'm really looking forward to his presentation later today. He's led numerous organizations through their transformation of data into strategic analytic capabilities. So, you know, we're just honored to have both of these people with us today that we can learn from. So I'm going to turn it over to Jorel to talk to us a little bit about Pandata Group.
Great, thanks, Brandy. Really excited to be here today to be participating in the Tableau user group. Pandata Group has been a part of the group in the past, but this is the first time I've actually presented at it. So really excited to be here. If you're not familiar with Pandata Group, we're about a 6-year-old company. We are anchored in Madison, but our team members are actually across the state and some in Chicago as well. So Green Bay, Milwaukee and the Fox Valley is well represented in addition to the Madison area. We do a lot of work with organizations that fall within that medium to small enterprise space. And for a lot of them, we're talking about helping them transform the collection and interpretation of their data, right? So helping them create modern, flexible platforms, which typically translates to how do we move into the cloud? How do we take advantage of what data we should be using that we're not using? And then the third piece, that human experience side, is really about what I guess you could say translates to data literacy at the end of the day. How do you start building data culture? How do you get everyone on board with where the organization is going to go with analytics? So we execute that with strategy, implementation, and then managed services for organizations. It just depends on, again, that right sizing approach to what you need as a company. Can I go to the next slide, please? So a lot of the conversation that Mark and I have around the modern data architecture, it really talks about flexibility and addresses a number of different trends that, especially in 2020 and 2019, we have seen across several organizations, whether it's financial services, CPG, heavy manufacturing. These are all the things that we really kind of come across day in and day out. And I'm really excited for you to hear Mark's story. He's got a great background with all these tools and this approach. So I'm only going to spend a few minutes, not much at all. But first and foremost, I mean, you're really talking about how do we wrap our hands around all the data that's there for this modern enterprise, right? So a lot of organizations are either migrating their legacy on-premise data warehouse or data platform to the cloud. If they haven't had any sort of development of a data warehouse or data platform, they're instantly implementing that with tools like Snowflake, for example. And you got to be living under a rock if you haven't heard of Snowflake yet. But we're working with a lot of companies to help them lower that cost of putting that platform in place, so they can easily connect to all these different data sources available to them and find a great way of streaming that in to a centralized spot. Now, the great thing that you're going to hear from Mark is this concept around reducing time to insight. And that means a lot of things to a lot of different people, right? But one of those areas is backlog. So whether you're a small BI team that needs to be really nimble and flexible, which is what you hear with Mark, or you're a larger organization, there's this idea or fear of too much backlog with requests from the business. So especially as everyone starts to really get into all the new analytics and they start asking for more, we want to put the tools in place that help minimize that backlog, get the time to value in place. And that's something that Matillion does brilliantly. And Mark's going to speak to that more than anything at all. It's got an intuitive drag and drop sort of feature that allows you to just click on an icon, whether it's a Google Analytics or a SQL Server database icon, and just kind of drag and drop and start connecting and orchestrating jobs seamlessly, right? The coding in your database basically disappears. There's a lot of transparency. as to where the source is coming from and what analytics is actually driving. So that leads back to kind of this unifying access for everybody, right? So if all the business-driven requests are coming in, and you've got this concept of data ops in place, and it's a top-down approach, you start knowingly working with the same data out of your centralized spot. In the case you'll hear from Mark, it's going to be Snowflake. With the right approach and the iterations involved to many ways, you're creating a data catalog and everyone's on the same page with the definitions, which then leads to basically improving the overall user experience, right? It's wonderful to hear about all the trainings that people are getting into for Tableau. Tableau has made data analytics more simplified. They kind of created that concept of how do we do this more easily and how do we create great visualizations around things. I think when we start moving into having a more flexible data platform, it starts moving that next layer of what data is important to my business, right? So that when an analyst is making or developing the right sort of visualization or report or dashboard, everyone really understands what's going on there. It's not, the tribal knowledge piece kind of disappears and everyone's on the same page. And so I think data literacy movement that we're seeing is again, that next generation of things. It's an evolution, if you will, that it's great to see it. And when you have the right data platform in the background powering that, we feel that it just enhances the end user experience and justifies things just a little bit more. Could I have the next slide, please? So again, I'm not going to get too deep in this whole concept, but for Pandata Group, and when we look at a modern data architecture, this is kind of a representation of what we're talking about, right? So it flows from left to right, and you're working with all the different sources of data important to your organization. And you're going to find, obviously, a lot of things that are there is probably what you're doing and working with today. But the gray area in the middle for us is kind of this general concept of a data platform. So it takes the data ingestion layer and it sort of couples it with the data storage and enrichment piece. And then that moves into that information interaction side. So this is where Matillion kind of fits into the play with this architecture, is right at that data ingestion layer. And it's a really powerful application that can work on kind of the batch ETL, ELT processes. It can work with real-time APIs. It has a great development tool to connect to APIs. And it's so intuitive and easy to work with that it kind of lends itself to almost being called a data prep tool, not just an ELT or ETL tool. So when we put together, this sort of architecture, which again, it's born in the cloud, every tool or technology that's associated with this is cloud native and cloud born, you get a typical result of a number of different really interesting things, right? So we've been doing cloud work since 2018. We've been a Matillion partner for about 1.5 years almost now, a Snowflake partner for 2 years. And what we commonly find in all of our engagements is that we can deploy a data platform within a month. And that's kind of unheard of in this side, when you had to wait for IT to set up storage connections, getting the right servers, getting everything spec'd out. That goes away. Now it's just, you should be able to make a call into IT and start deploying, not implementing. So we like to use the word deployment instead. If you are interested in data storage costs, if that ever comes up, typically you're going to find a decrease of your storage cost by 40%. What I think is critical, again, is that time to value, is that you're going to get to market faster, about 30 to 60%. And that's where we start looking at the channels box. So it's not just like the core applications or business applications like Tableau. We're also talking about customer-facing applications and things that they're going to want to see and interact with. So it really pushes down a little bit more as well. And typically our clients are seeing an ROI on their investment in these platforms within about 6 months. So you don't really wait 18 months or anything like that. You're really up and at it and ready to go really quickly. A box that I didn't include in here is the whole concept around architecture, governance. That's a whole different story. But at the bottom is a critical area, and that's development and operations. And that's where you start learning about new ways to kind of incorporate iteration, right? And when you're talking about large scale Tableau development, you hear iteration all the time. Data ops, this is conceptually data ops, is kind of that same manner of how do we iterate on the data modeling piece of it, and then incorporate the BI team from that place of it, from that aspect as well. So this is kind of where we're going with a lot of our client engagements, large and small. And again, this is where now Mark's representation of his architecture might look like this, but it might not as well. But that is how we're kind of laying the foundation for our clients. And I think you're going to hear a lot about this process with Mark as well. Next slide. So I think I also get the pleasure of introducing Matillion to the organization. So it looked like there are a few question marks on who Matillion is, and that's okay. So Matillion was actually developed from a UK company who originally started as a BI consulting group and wanted to get a better way of accessing data through modern tools. And it kind of started with Redshift at the end of the day. But they started developing this great product with simple connection tools. It became incredibly attractive to organizations that were moving to the cloud because it's engineered to work with all those respective cloud data warehouses. So their product sets are related to BigQuery, Redshift, and Snowflake. And what that means is that each of those products is engineered to work to how that cloud data platform works. It's really, truly brilliant. What we really love the fact for our clients is the absolute speed to market. The speed to actually just get up and going. Again, it's simple to use, and the savings for it compared to a lot of traditional ETL tools, and I've been doing this for 20 years, it's pretty impressive. It really takes down a lot of barriers of entry to really roll out a really nicely detailed data platform. So again, we've been working with Matillion for about 1.5 years, almost 2 years. With every Snowflake engagement we've conducted and performed, Matillion's been kind of the go-to ELT, ETL tool for each of those engagements. Recently, just this year, they were, for the first time, introduced to the Gartner Magic Quadrant. I expect to see them kind of grow within that space and recognition as well, as cloud data warehousing really takes off. So again, Mark's going to talk a little bit about his experience with Matillion and Snowflake and how that impacted in a positive way his work with Tableau. So from here, I'm going to hand it off to Mark.
Thanks so much, Jorel. And I just wanted to remind everyone, if you have questions either for Jorel or Mark, find that Q&A panel, and that's where you'll put your questions for our presenters. And again, we're going to randomly select people to win swag from those people who ask questions. So think about your questions and ask them. But I will turn it over to Mark.
Hi, everybody. All right, so I think we can get started here. Just want to start off by saying thanks to the Milwaukee Tableau user group for giving me the opportunity to present GMR Marketing's story, basically our journey to a modern data architecture. I am sharing the story from GMR's point of view, although I will be speaking about Matillion and a couple other technology companies. I'm not being paid to do so, but I'm always open to free swag. So hopefully this journey today will resonate in some way, shape, or form with everyone, no matter where your organization is at. So this is GMR's story so far.
And just FYI, Mark, I'm not seeing anything if you're sharing something.
Oh, you're not? Okay. Hold on one moment here. Try this again. All right, how about now?
Yes, Perfect.
All right, forgot to hit the share button. That's what I get for using Teams and WebEx and not Zoom. So what I'm going to be presenting on today, I'm going to break it down into a few things. Just a high-level overview of our current, or I should say our legacy business intelligence environment that's evolving. Tie it back to a presentation that I gave at last year's Q3 2019 Tableau user group meeting about a specific pain point we had with Tableau extracts and our row-level security requirements. I want to speak a little bit about why a modern data architecture. You probably can't do a Google search or talk to a vendor these days without a million reasons why, but I kind of want to tell you why from GMR's perspective. Hit on a couple of the key players within that modern data architecture, which includes Snowflake, Matillion, and Tableau, and then just kind of speak to how those products working together are really powering basically the future for analytics at GMR. So high-level overview of our legacy business intelligence environment probably looks similar to a lot of companies in the area currently or in the not too far past. We had a legacy data warehouse built with an on-premise SQL Server database and SSIS to perform ETL. Our end user consumption tools primarily is Tableau, but we do have a couple one-off reporting services reports and an SSAS tabular model that my friends in the finance department love because they love pivot tables and Excel. You know, our data warehouse isn't massive. You know, we've got 21 fact tables, 17 dimensions. The slide's a little old, 50 million rows. It's probably 100 million plus. But we do have quite a few Tableau workbooks, over 100 workbooks, 200 plus views, and over 100 users, which that continues to grow. And then our Tableau environment consists of one Tableau 8-core server license, and that's key, and I'll get to one of the reasons for a modern data architecture, to that in a little bit. So again, this was a tried and true architecture. You know, however, this is my opinion. If you're using on-premise Microsoft SQL Server, there's really little to no new features that are coming to that product, at least from a BI and data and analytics standpoint. They're really reserved for their cloud products. So if you're not using Azure Synapse Analytics, Azure Data Factory, Power BI, you're not going to get a lot of the newer features that they're rolling out for data and analytics. So that was important to us because we're not using Azure or Power BI. So touching on the presentation I did last year, I won't totally get into this, but I'm sure you're all aware there's a couple of different ways to store data related to a Tableau workbook. You can either do a Tableau extract or a live connection. Like most people, we started off with Tableau extracts that work great until we started adding more users and adding more workbooks and needed to implement and administer some very fine-grained row-level security. Just to kind of give you an idea of what we had to do, every single workbook, we had to embed in hundreds and hundreds of line scripts using the is member of calculation in order to basically implement our row-level security, meaning what user can see what data. Being a marketing company, for whatever reason, we're very restrictive on who can see what. We have security groups like what agency do you belong to, what clients are you working on, what projects are you working on, what department do you belong to. So you could be a combination of any one of those 5 different things. So very difficult to keep those scripts up to date in all our Tableau workbooks. So what we look to do in the future state was to switch over to a live database connection. And really what that live database connection would allow us to do is leverage a set of 5, basically what I'm calling security tables that would filter down the data we get from our fact tables in order to provide that security. So really it's in one place, right? It's reusable, it's a one-stop shop. We don't have to run the risk of, oh, do we copy and paste that script correctly from one workbook to the next? And also we're looking for speed. Tableau is pretty quick with our is member of function calculations, but some of our larger workbooks, we were noticing some security degradation. And then one of the things that's not on here is since last year, we've been actually using Tableau for our clients and basically presenting back some of our client data. So the number of users in that script became exponentially more complicated. So we really needed to move towards what I would consider to be a database level solution. And with our existing SQL Server database, we tried an experimentation with that, but it just didn't have the horsepower to give us the performance that we needed. So at that point in time, we began a POC of Snowflake. So why a modern data architecture? That was one very specific pain point that I spoke to related to row-level security in Tableau. But really, there's many reasons for that. And I'm going to break it down looking at it from a couple different lenses or a couple different viewpoints. So organizationally, GMR Marketing, we belong to, I would call it our holding company, which is called Omnicom, which is like 125,000 plus person, 150 plus agency, media, marketing, advertising organization. And then within there, we've got a couple different parent companies, one specifically that we roll up to. And our parent company is steering agencies to use cloud-based services and the AWS platform. So previously I mentioned that our legacy architecture had SQL Server, really prevented us from using any of the Azure services or cloud products that are out there. Kind of tied into that, all of our existing servers, which were primarily Windows servers to run all our different applications at GMR, they were all ported up into the AWS cloud. And then like a lot of organizations, we are just increasing the usage of our cloud-based services and also exchanging data internally between our different applications and business intelligence and analytics via APIs. People, to me, this is really the most critical, important piece. Historically at GMR, we've had a very small IT and specifically business intelligence team that does everything. Our BI team does requirements gathering, does testing, does all the development, does all the server administration, from soup to nuts, from data acquisition through data transformation, through managing and modeling the data warehouse, through Tableau. So a very small team that we need to do everything on. So currently our team consists of 3.5 people. So that's what we look like today. Due to COVID, I know a lot of people are in this same bucket, right? We're doing more with less people. For GMR, unfortunately, we did have some layoffs and we did lose some business, but for the most part, anything that's data and technology related has just boomed and we have less people to do it with. So really important for us to have a modern data architecture that's easy to use, can scale fast, and really quick to deliver results. And then this ties in as well to what I just spoke to, being easy. 2 individuals on our team, one that started on my team a week before we went into lockdown and didn't go into the office anymore, was 1 year out of college, and he was a former actuary who wanted to transition into data analytics, had no idea what a data warehouse was, had no idea how to write SQL or Python or anything like that. So it was really important to be able to leverage a platform to have that person get up and running. We also had a member on our team who's a 0.5 person, part-time on our team, who's kind of a traditional business analyst, not really a data person, but was very interested in it. We needed to kind of reallocate some resources internally, so we were lucky to get this person. And again, I think tools like Tableau and Matillion make it very easy for somebody with very little experience in data and analytics to deliver pretty quickly. Processes, we have dependencies between teams. An example historically has always been there's never enough time to build a data pipeline to acquire data through our native ETL tools. We'd have to hand a file off to a develop.net developer, who would then connect to some API and enhance the data. We're trying to cut that out because A, we just don't have the resources, and B, we just don't have the time. And that kind of gets the streamlining of the data acquisition and enhancement process. Continuing along, technology. Really, at the end of the day, it's all about technology, right? So I mentioned we were having some performance issues with live connections to our existing on-premise SQL Server database, related specifically to our complicated row-level security model. And As far as a modern data architecture, I've always thought SQL Server is a great product. I liken it to like a Swiss Army knife. It does a lot of things, but nothing great, at least when it comes to data and analytics. So I kind of feel like we were looking for something purpose-built, something specific for data and analytics from a database, data storage perspective, as well as a data integration, ETL perspective. And the other key piece I mentioned, we have an 8-core Tableau server license. We want to maximize that. If you were to look at how many resources Tableau extracts take up, you'd be pretty surprised. So in order for us to add more users, roll it out to our external clients, we really needed to maximize our usage of Tableau, the data visualization piece, and less so on the data extract piece. So key component for us was getting off of those extracts related to maximizing our 8-core server license. And then finally, data. I know a lot of people probably in the audience today have big data. We do not have big data. We have small data, but it's very complicated sometimes, and it requires a lot of robust data integration and transformation. Some of the newer things that we're trying to do that we were dependent upon others on, we wanted to bring in-house. So we needed a platform, a tool to allow us to acquire data ourselves within our BI team. Specifically, I can go over a couple of examples. We needed to enhance data with lat and long. And the way that we did that was based on address, running it through the Google Places API. So now we can do that using Matillion ETL. MongoDB, we have a proprietary application that was built on MongoDB for some of the client events that we have. Wanted to use Tableau to basically share back and visualize that data with our clients. Not easy to do when it's not in a relational database, unless it's a modern data platform. So again, pretty easy to connect to MongoDB, flatten out those data structures and visualize those within Tableau. And then being a marketing company, social media, we were spending a lot of money on third-party sources that kind of aggregated social media data, prepped it for us, and then gave it back to us. We also had one-off people who were going in, downloading data from Instagram, from Facebook, from Twitter into Excel, doing manual manipulation. So we've been able, in a few instances, to be able to automate that and take that workload off of our marketing analysts and let them do what they do well, which is analyze social media and not have to prep the data from these sites. And then, like all of us, we continue to get more and more one-off requests, and people are nice about it, but it's always like, I need this ASAP and I need it done right, meaning I need the data to be right. So we don't necessarily have the time to build out all this stuff in weeks and months. We need to do it in days and weeks. So I guess before I get into the components, does anybody have any questions related to kind of why a modern data architecture? Again, I think everybody in some way, shape, or form is in this boat, but this is specific to GMR.
Yeah. Hey, Mark. We actually have we have 4 questions currently.
Sure. Sure.
So I'll throw them out at you. And then I believe you have other slides as well. So I guess the first question, just, well, actually have you talked much? I don't think you've talked too much about Matillion yet. So maybe we'll come back to that. But for user security roles, do you use like groups in Tableau? And if so, what issues did you see as that kind of scaled?
That's a great question. So we started using groups. And originally our groups were tied into our Active Directory. Won't get into the nitty-gritty detail of this, but at some point in time over the last year and a half, our parent company moved away from Active Directory and into Okta and another proprietary solution. So it broke all of our groups. So we do use groups, but we use the groups to see what Tableau projects and what Tableau workbooks you can see. But the actual, what I would call row level security, when you have access to that workbook, what data do you see? That's all done now with these security tables that I'm referring to, and was previously done with the is member of script in Tableau. So again, I think it's going to be very dependent. We started off down that route using groups. We still do to a limited extent, but we do not for row level security. And a lot of that is based on the fact that our parent company, who does all of our identity management no longer uses Active Directory.
Gotcha. You've talked a little bit about row level security so far, and you're kind of moved from extracts to live connections. It sounds like you can still leverage row level security on both extracts and live connections. Is that correct?
Correct. And I think there might be a couple of ways to do it, and we followed kind of the Tableau recommended best practices. There's some articles that are out there in the knowledge base. But within Tableau, using extracts, you can do that is member of function. But again, if you have 100 users with 10 different combinations of what they can see, think of each one of those as a line of code. That's a 1,000-line script that you got to embed in every workbook. Hard to maintain that when you have 100+ workbooks. So you can still do that. But if you have very specific, very detailed row-level security, it gets very difficult to do the more workbooks you have and the more users you have. So in our case, that's why we made the decision to move to database, to do that row-level security at the database using these security tables, where you basically make an entry per user, whether you belong to this agency or this project or this department, but then it works against all your data sources in the database that is ultimately being consumed by Tableau.
Yeah. And how do you keep that? This is my question. How do you keep those tables updated then?
So that is a great question, Brandy. Prior to this whole COVID pandemic, we had an internal IT project, not my team, but somebody else's team, to basically write a web application where leaders within for those clients or for those agencies or for those departments would be able to go in and assign permissions on their own, who could see what. Unfortunately, that got put on the back burner. So right now, it's basically all through communication. We typically want a paper trail. So through email communication, people will say, Charlie Brown needs to have access to these 2 departments and these 2 projects. And then somebody on the BI team will go in and basically manually update those tables behind the scenes. So not an ideal solution, but it's kind of our temporary interim solution until we get some technology resources freed up to implement that for us.
Gotcha. Rob, who previously asked the question about like Active Directory groups, said, ugh, I see my company is going there with Okta and SSO. I think, Mark, you kind of touched on something, is that there's a lot of different technology elements, and you can compile them kind of in different ways depending on, how you want to implement security. From my perspective, we have Okta and SSO and Active Directory, and we still use Active Directory groups in Tableau. So, I think that there are a lot of different ways to apply that information or, to apply those technologies. So, but the security groups, the row level security stuff is just a hard nut to crack, I think, no matter what technology.
Yeah. And just to add on, even though our parent group is going away from Active Directory and Okta and going towards Okta, I think it's possible. It was difficult for us to do. We used to have local control over Active Directory and of Okta, meaning it was very easy for our local help desk or our technology teams to make changes locally. So when somebody emails the BI team and says, hey, give Charlie Brown access to client ABC, now they have to go through our Omnicom help desk, and literally it could be a week-long delay plus before they get that. So we've chosen to bypass that altogether.
Yeah, and I think is the goal to ultimately like automate that database, like row level security stuff using scripts?
Yeah, so actually the automation kind of already happened. So with the live connections, once an entry is made into those security tables, it's live. We're just doing that manually by updating the tables, being the BI team. But once we get that lightweight app developed where people can go in and make those changes on their own, it'll effectively be making those changes to the security tables behind the scenes. So so some automation is already in place.
Cool, awesome. Well, I think that's it for the questions that pertain to like row level security. I know that there are a few when it comes to you know, I think other data platform and ETL tools.
Yep.
So I don't want to.
Yeah, and I could probably speak to that as well. So before I get into it, if you've known me long enough, you've probably heard me say many, many years ago, right? IBM Data Stage or Informatica, I would say either Oracle or SQL Server, either Azure, Snowflake, Google BigQuery. You can make them all work, right? A lot of these choices are already made for you, and in our case, a lot of them already were, being the platforms, so our choices were limited. So I'll try and weave that in as I talk to kind of these components that we ended up selecting. So moving on, spoiler alert, I think I already mentioned it, but our modern data architecture GMR features really three main components: Snowflake, Matillion, and Tableau. Everyone's familiar with Tableau. I think most people are familiar, or at least heard of Snowflake, but I'll still touch on those. But I'm going to speak probably the most about Matillion. So let's dive into the details. Again, just to reinforce, this is GMR's story. You might all have different reasons and different requirements for the different products that you pick for your modern data architecture. But these are some of the key reasons behind where we landed. So Snowflake, that's where we landed. Why Snowflake? I think I kind of mentioned already, but our parent company basically, I guess dictating is a good word, dictated that we use the AWS platform. So that means anything Microsoft Azure was out of the question. So if we wanted something very specific for data and analytics, there's a few niche players that are out there, but really it's Redshift and Snowflake are the two big games in town. We just thought Redshift was just a little too complicated and Snowflake was really quite easy. And that's kind of the first key point I want to point out: ease of use. It's fully ANSI SQL compatible. So anything that you've written in the past, it's a proprietary T-SQL or PL SQL is going to run. So that was important to us. Also, optimize direct connections for Tableau, IBM, Cognos. We do have a few Cognos things, but it's mostly Tableau. Optimize connections to Snowflake just makes things super easy. There's not any workarounds that we need to do when we switch from SQL Server to Tableau. It just worked. And this is a key one: no database administration. I do all the on-premise SQL Server administration database stuff for the data warehouse and the BI platform. Honestly, it's my least favorite thing to do. But even beyond me not personally liking to do it all that much, it takes away time from developing new solutions, from helping lead and coach my team. So for us, for being a really small team, it's important to have very little to no administration. And I'm speaking about Snowflake and database administration, but it really goes for all the products. We needed something high performance. As I mentioned, our on-premise SQL Server database, we tried live connections with really big fact tables and these complicated row-level security scripts, and we were having lags, which was just not acceptable to what we were trying to do. So we needed something where we would not have any lag when we did that kind of real-time computation, and Snowflake fit the bill on that one. The ETL processing, it's much faster than it was on the SQL Server database using SSIS. Not a huge factor for us because we only do a couple of intraday data warehouse refreshes, but potentially in the future when we grow, when our data gets larger and we have more near real-time type of things, that will become an important piece of it. Customization, Snowflake has this concept of virtual warehouses to run multiple workloads. Really what that means is instead of buying one on-premise server or one EC2 instance in AWS, that's a one-size-fits-all, that's big enough to run our ETL within a 30-minute window. Now we can have effectively two virtual databases or two virtual data warehouses, one that we start and stop just when we need to run our ETL processing, size specifically for that workload, and then the other one that we pretty much run most of the day, which is going to power our live connections from Tableau for the dashboards, along with any other ad hoc data analysis people run against that Snowflake database. And cost is very reasonable. I'm not going to say we are paying any less money than with SQL Server, but it's pretty much a wash. And what we're getting, in my opinion, is way better, way faster, way more modern than the on-premise SQL Server database that we previously had. So, and the reason is because it's pay for what you use with per second compute pricing and optimized storage. So we're only paying, for example, let's just say most people work, I don't know, 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. Most of the time, 6 a.m. to 8 p.m., it's lightly used with queries and live connections for Tableau. And then we've got a half-hour window where we do ETL processing overnight. So we're not paying for 24 hours worth of usage. It's really just paid for when the database gets hit. Matillion. This is what I'm going to spend a little bit more time talking about. I know this slide was shared before, but there's a few key points on here that I just wanted to hit on. We did do a short list of vendors for ETL/data preparation, and Matillion kept popping up at the top. I would say about a year ago, we really got interested in Matillion, and then we started a POC at the end of the year. I personally, in the past, have used DataStage, Informatica, obviously SSIS previously, and here at GMR. Data Factory is not in the cards for us. I've also worked with Alteryx and a couple of others. And really for what we needed, Matillion hit all the key points. One of the things was it was purpose-built. It really is purpose-built for loading a cloud data warehouse. Additionally, you can do data preparation for it, but it's really good at doing the transformations you need to build fact tables, dimension tables, and load data directly into a cloud data warehouse, and specifically, in our case, Snowflake. Simple to use. I can't speak about this enough. Just being a visual, graphical user interface. A lot of the components are pre-built. You drag them onto a canvas, you configure them, you connect them to make a workflow, similar to all the other tools that I mentioned, but very, very easy to use. Again, I mentioned a couple individuals that joined our team recently that had 0 to no experience in business intelligence, data warehousing, analytics. They were able to pick this up very quickly. And then speed. You know, a lot of people call it time to value. You know, I kind of like to think of it as how fast can we start something and deliver it to production that our end users can start using. So for us, that's an important key point. Okay, Matillion ETL. Here's some specific things that I want to hit on that we leverage here at GMR, and kind of some must-haves. So they've got this concept of orchestration jobs and transformation jobs. Really what they do is they transform the data that's raw before you load it somewhere. And in our case, it's sometimes reporting tables, but typically fact and dimension tables within our data warehouse. Few components that we use a lot of: calculator, just like it sounds. You can do all sorts of calculations in there. A plus B equals C. You can either write the Snowflake SQL, or you can use the built-in kind of component to just enter what you wanted. Filtering, we do a lot of filtering. Loop iterators, very important for us. I don't know how common that is in a lot of different places, but we've got this concept of snapshot fact tables that require loop iterations. And it's not easy to do with a lot of tools that are out there. And it was very easy to do at Matillion ETL. So I think that's one of the areas where it really shines. Split field, we get a lot of data, you know, where it's separated by different delimiters, a dash, a backslash, but sometimes it's a forward slash. So it's got a built-in component for that. Used to write a lot of SQL with char indexes and trying to find the position and stuff, and it's not easy to do. With the split field component, makes it real easy. And then we do a lot of Windows calculations. I don't know if people know what Windows calculations are. Things like first value, last value, lead, lag. We do quite a bit of that because, again, we don't have big data, but sometimes our data is very, very complicated transformations that we need to apply to it. And then unpivot. If you have a lot of data that comes in from spreadsheets, you're gonna want to learn to use the unpivot calculation. So that's some of the components. The data source connections, some of these are new for us, and this was one of the reasons why we wanted to get into the modern data architecture. We're starting to acquire a lot more data via REST APIs. I gave an example before about our Google Places API. We have a client where they do events all over the United States, tens of thousands of them, and we get the addresses of where these locations happen. Sometimes the addresses are not correct, so they need to be cleaned up. And then we also wanted to map it in Tableau and get as granular as we could with a Latin long. So the way we're able to do that is to basically connect right through Matillion ETL to the Google Places API, run those records through with these location addresses, and then bring back Latin long and clean up any bad fields within the address. Files. We do a lot of stuff with files. Like everybody, we've got on-premise Windows file shares, but we also do a lot of stuff with Box and a lot of stuff with Amazon S3. There's a lot of security around both of those things, being Box and Amazon S3. So it's real easy to configure our Matillion jobs to connect to these data sources to get those raw data files from Box and from Amazon. We have a lot of stuff still within SQL Server, so we need to connect to that. But we also have this other application that was custom built in-house that we use for many, many clients, and it's built on MongoDB. Some people may or may not know, MongoDB is a document database, so not real easy to connect to it. When you do connect to it, you need to kind of flatten out the data that comes back. So all that capability exists within Matillion ETL. And then we have done some work where we have connected directly to Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter to pull information out of those APIs. Next thing, whatever solution we picked, and in this case, again, it was Matillion ETL, we've got some pretty strict data privacy requirements that we needed to meet. One of the things was they did not want any of our data to be outside or in any type of shared compute resource in the cloud. So with Matillion, we were able to deploy it within our existing AWS virtual private cloud, which basically checks the boxes for all our security people. Easy to use, I mentioned that. I think Tableau calls us data people. But for anybody who's a data person, right, that doesn't really know how to write SQL or Python, having a tool like Tableau and specifically to do data prep, in this case, Matillion ETL, is essential. And then one thing we always get with all these complicated calculations and transformations that we do, I mean, sometimes the same person asks us 5 times within the same month. How is this calculation done again? So it's really helped us. Matillion has this great auto generation of documentation, which we posted on an internal wiki site. So people can go right there and get all the information that they need. And in probably 80 to 90% of the cases, they can self-serve themselves because the auto-generated documentation is very robust, very easy to read. And then just the visual workflow of all the components makes it, I think, a lot easier for people to follow than a 1,000-line SQL store procedure, which has all different levels of nested queries and inner joins and fun stuff like that. And I do want to give a shout out. I think Kate's on the line here. But so far, we've had excellent account and technical support from Matillion. And the documentation that they have out there is great. The person who was the former actuary, who's now been on the BI team for like 6 months, he's primarily self-taught himself, and it's mostly been through him working through the work and referencing the Matillion documentation that's online. So I just want to show a print screen here. Our legal department wouldn't let me fire up Matillion and show you all our trade secrets. So this is just a print screen of a pretty typical transformation job. Kind of on the left-hand side, you can see that's the canvas. That's where all the different components you drag on, you configure each one of those, and then you connect them together to form a workflow. And you can see at the very end on the far right, we've got something called Fact General Ledger. So this is our ETL job for our Fact General Ledger. And then on the right-hand side, you can see the individual component. When I clicked on the Pass 1 component, that's a calculator component, it actually had several different calculations. This is just one of the calculations that was in here, where it's basically doing a case statement. So I just want to give you a little view of what the user interface looks like. Again, probably very similar to a lot of the different ETL and data preparation tools that are out there. So now I want to tie this back into Tableau. The good thing for GMR, and honestly, it's one of the reasons why I joined GMR for almost 5 years ago now, was they were in the process of procuring a Tableau server. So this has been a key component of our modern architecture for quite some time. And I just want to hit on a few key points of how we've been evolving over the last year, the last couple of years. Number one, empower data people to develop their own dashboards to share within the agency or with our clients externally. I think that's a key, that's an area where we can definitely grow in. But going back a year and a half ago, our BI team built all the dashboards, 100%. Now we've got several power users within the organization who develop their own dashboards and are able to share those within the agency and within those clients. So I think, again, a tool like Tableau makes that easy to do. Tableau dashboards, man, I look at some of the Tableau dashboards that we designed like 4 years ago. Ooh, they were not pretty to look at, but we learned a lot along the way. And one of the things that we had the advantage of being a marketing company is we have several designers and UI experts within the organization. We actually, within the last year, added a UI expert, design expert to our internal IT team. So we're able to leverage that person to help us actually do some wireframing, some Tableau dashboard reviews, to be able to give it more of a modern look and feel around some of the UI UX design standards we have around our digital products. Establish Tableau as a standard data analytics platform at GMR Marketing. Again, lucky to have Tableau server, but there's all kinds of other ways to do data and analytics, right? People from Excel to SAS or SPSS. It's probably a lot of different things. I've seen some people, again, being a creative agency, do stuff in Adobe Designer, but we're really looking to leverage the Tableau server and the experience we have within the agency, and we started doing a lot more of that. There's several client teams we partnered with within the last year to develop externally facing client dashboards using the Tableau server, which is kind of the second bullet point, the next bullet point that I led into. And then enable more efficient and transparent project management and people/resource utilization. That's a mouthful, but that's really key. We're a services organization, and our work has ebbed and flowed since COVID. So it's been really important for us to understand who's working on what, when those projects, are being completed, when there's scope creep, when people are finishing up early. A lot of that was very departmentalized, but now that we're all working remotely, we've built a series of dashboards daily that updates, that gives people this information to really see where do we have extra resources, where truly do we need to find a resource. It's really been a big focus for GMR Marketing over the last couple of months. Some of our source systems actually were updated to capture more information that we did previously that are now flowing through to our Tableau dashboard. So basically project management and people resource utilization really been something key that we've been focused on at GMR. And then finally, building a robust data culture to become a truly data-driven organization. I know everybody says they're a data organization, data-driven. I was just on a company town hall the other day and they brought that up again. And I agree, we're definitely on our way, but from my view, we're not there. But I feel like this modern data architecture is really moving us in that direction and giving us a lot of capabilities that we did not have before. So finally, I just want to touch on a few opportunities that we're either starting on or I think are kind of on deck for us. We want to integrate even more diverse data sources in Data Warehouse or into Tableau, especially with some of our clients and some of the client work that we do. A lot of stuff is not relational databases. It's all over the place. Giving us a tool like Matillion ETL to be able to acquire that data, transform it, and then visualize it in Tableau is going to be big for us. I mentioned we're part of a large agency organization, and we have many, many clients. So this modern data architecture is going to give us an easier way to securely share data with our clients and with our sister agencies. We do that today, but I don't think we do it all that well. We do it the same way we did it 20, 30 years ago. Files, email, FTPs. So we're actually in the process right now of developing a reusable data and analytics product for across our sister agency and for our clients. What does that mean? A lot of stuff was built one-off to spec for clients or just used within GMR. We're actually starting to build data products that can be reused and leveraged across the entire organization, across multiple clients. So again, I think this modern data architecture really helps us do that. Data science, we have pockets of data science and it's been going on for a while, but I think it's really going to enable more data science and extend the data science capabilities that we have at GMR. Data exchange, I talked a little bit about that being a pain point. We want to reduce the friction of that. We want to get more real time. A lot of our stuff is refreshed overnight, weekly, monthly. Really want to get some more real time stuff. I think the combination of Snowflake, Matillion, and Tableau gives us that capabilities. And then the last one, this is one that may or may not resonate with people out there, but Tableau is great. I know they have a data prep product, so you could easily use that, or in our case, we would use Matillion ETL. More self-service data preparation. I know a lot of people within our organization spend way too much time doing data preparation. And if they could leverage tools like this to do it on their own and tap into our team's expertise to teach them how to fish, so to speak, I think that would go a long, long way. So that's some of the data and analytics opportunities I see currently or coming soon at GMR. So that wraps up my presentation. And if we've got any time left, love to take some questions and answers.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. And this was, as usual, a fantastic presentation. So thank you again so much for taking the time. I know that I feel like the response has been fantastic. So I think the things that you're talking about and discussing, I think a lot of people have had similar issues with. So, learning from you is incredibly valuable. So thank you for taking the time. We do have a few questions. We're actually not going to be able to get to all of them because I do want to keep us on track, but we have about 5 minutes where we can take some questions. And then Mark, if you're able, I think you can actually type responses to any questions that we don't get to. So, okay. I guess the first kind of question I'll throw out there, kind of going back to that row level security, in the recent Tableau conference, I'm not sure if you saw, but Tableau is, I think it's more on their roadmap. I don't think it's something that that they're rolling out anytime soon, but centralized row level security. So you're not having to do it maybe at the data source level, but like even higher level than that in Tableau server. Did you happen to catch that at the conference at all?
No, I didn't participate in the conference. And I know previously, going back a year plus, we worked with our Tableau rep and did our own research and talked to folks. And, there was no native functionality, but I think even back then it was on the roadmap. So that's definitely something we would be interested in. I think the one thing that we're really cognizant about is, given, we're part of a larger organization, things can change, and we really want to be able to do that row level security at the source of the truth at the database level. So if any folks in our sister agencies needed to connect to Snowflake through Power BI, for example, they could, and that security would still apply. So really that's one of the things, I didn't bring it up in the presentation, but that's one of the thoughts we had, is putting it in that database layer allowed many different tools to access that shared data source, which is Snowflake, and still apply those row level security permissions.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm assuming maybe a similar answer, but have you tried leveraging like Tableau LOD calculations rather than those dedicated like window functions in SQL?
Yeah, good question. We do have a few dashboards where we do level of detail calculations. This kind of goes back to an architecture and a design. I guess I'm an old school data warehouse person, so I prefer to do a lot of that data modeling and a lot of that transformation at the data warehouse layer. So that's the reasoning why we do a lot of those level of detail type of calculations within the database layer. But I can see where we could leverage some calculations. I think the bigger part for some of those Windows calcs is not to get into detail, but one of our dimension tables contains all the projects we've ever done. And that's probably 500,000 to 1 million records. And within there, there's different levels of projects. And for each one of those, row by row by row, we got to figure out some certain things. So I think from a performance standpoint, it just makes sense to do it at the database layer. But I will say we do have some dashboards where we do use level of detail calculations. So to summarize, I think it just really depends on what we're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, somebody asked a very interesting question around data platform and architecture. So for the layperson, like a user, an end user, what's the difference between a data warehouse, a data lake, a data mart?
Sure. I'm sure if you Googled it, there'd be a million different answers out there, but this is from my perspective. I actually don't use the term data mart anymore. That term has been around for a long, long time, and I feel it's just gotten confusing over time. It used to mean a data mart was like, I'm just going to call it a data source that was built specifically for a business function or a department. I feel like that terminology has kind of gone away, but that's how I would say. So a data mart is specific to a business process and or a department, whereas a data warehouse, a lot of people call it an enterprise data warehouse, is more holistic. So like, for example, within our data warehouse, we have financial information, we have human resources information, we have diversity information, we have client information, we have all kinds of stuff within our data warehouse. So you could probably take a subset of that and call it a data mart. So data mart could be physical, it could just be like a virtual grouping. Data warehouse, again, I think is a lot of data warehouse typically has fact and dimension tables. At least that's the way I would describe it. Whether it's the Kimball methodology or the IMNN methodology. Whereas a data lake is typically a raw data access where maybe you have files or copies of database tables that are all in one place that maybe some or all people can access. Kind of like a one-stop shop. So we do have a data lake as well, but not many people access it. It's typically used to build out our data warehouse, but we also have stuff that we don't build in our data warehouse where we pull in files specifically for clients, land it in a data lake, do no transformation, and then pull that in through Tableau. So we do have that concept of a data lake as well. So I guess to summarize, data lake, in my opinion, is just it's a place to put all your data, whether it be files or connections to databases or copies of database tables with little to no transformation. Data warehouse has transformations, typically to create the fact and dimension tables.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. That was a fantastic explanation. One last question. So kind of back to Matillion, because you've obviously, it's part of your workflow. What are the scheduling options that Matillion offers?
Yeah, I mean, they've got a pretty robust scheduler. You know, from our perspective, we've got jobs that run nightly. We've got jobs that run hourly, or I should say hourly, a couple times a day. So we're able to schedule those. So each job in and of itself can be scheduled. You can also create like a parent job where multiple other jobs are part of, kind of group them together, and then you can set that to a schedule too. I would compare it very closely to the scheduling functionality within Tableau Server for their extract refreshes.
Awesome, thank you. So there are a few more questions out in the Q&A panel. If you don't mind maybe taking some time, with the remaining time we have to just answer those. I'm sure people appreciate them. And I'm actually gonna steal the screen share, if you don't mind. And stand by. So, thank you, Mark. Again, thank you so much for taking the time to present. It's always fantastic to hear, from people who have actually gone through this. So thank you so much for your time. I know people have really been enjoying it. For everybody who's in attendance, thank you so much for asking thoughtful questions. They've been fantastic questions. So I really appreciate that. Anybody who's asking questions, again, is being entered to win some awesome prizes at the end. So keep them coming. You have more opportunities. But currently in our agenda, we're at the time where we're going to take a break. So I'm going to give everybody maybe about 10 minutes, so just a little bit past 2:30 Central Time. I'd like for everybody to come back, and we're going to kick it off with the next segment of our meeting, which is about a hiring manager panel. So we'll have the opportunity to pick the brains of some hiring managers in our community. So, if you don't have anything to do during your break, take a moment and connect with your Milwaukee Tableau user group. There's a lot of different ways you can connect with us, and any way that you want to engage us, we'd appreciate it. So see you back here in about 10 minutes. Thanks, everyone. All right, welcome back, everyone. Hopefully everyone's back. See a few of our presenters turning on their video. Hi. So Crystal, I see you just asked a question in the chat, which is what are some of the must-watch presentations? I think that's a fantastic question. For those of you who did attend TC last week, let us know what sessions you found the most valuable, because yeah, for those of us who want to go back and watch stuff, your advice would be really valuable. So let us know. I also shared a fun message with a horrible link for those of you who may want to kind of like keep in touch with one another and share, you know, funny stories, or, you know, maybe you want to bother Mark with like very detailed questions. Sorry, Mark, I'm signing you up for that. Definitely sign up for our Slack workspace. So that's just if you're not familiar with Slack, it's just like a chat, like an application. You can either download it on your phone or your computer, or even use it in a browser, and it just allows you to chat with people. So I know we use that. So we've used that for Milwaukee. This is like a Wisconsin, all of Wisconsin one. So we're just kind of expanding the audience there a little bit. And I know we used it during Tableau conference actually to talk about, you know, what some of our favorite sessions were, and to just like geek out over new features that were coming. So, so definitely join us on Slack. I'll be sharing a lot of content from today's meeting there as well. So, all right. So speaking of Tableau conference, I guess I just wanted to take a moment to, you know, talk about it. If you guys didn't check it out, you should. It's free. So most of the sessions were recorded, and you can actually just go and sign in, sign up, and check out those recorded sessions. You just go to tc20.tableau.com. I think some of my favorites were, you know, always hearing about the Tableau Roadmap. What's coming is always super exciting. And then I think some of the big themes of the year were kind of like data literacy and data culture, which Mark spoke to a little bit, right? Data governance. Also, Mark spoke to Salesforce Einstein and the integration of that kind of tool with Tableau was a big theme for the year. And then they had industry tracks. So if you're in healthcare or government or finance, they had, you know, kind of these half-day tracks that were all specific to those different areas. So definitely check it out. And if one session particularly spoke to you, definitely let us know in the chat window. And then this Viz is the winner of the Iron Viz competition. So if you haven't been to the Tableau conference before, every year, like 3 people get up on stage and they build a Viz in like 20 minutes. So this was the winning Viz. So it's pretty cool, and it's out on Tableau Public if you want to go check it out. Oh yeah, and Crystal posted a link. Thank you, Crystal. For those people who want to partake in the fun photo booth, like this fun photo of me here, you can still do that, and then share that picture with us. I'd love to make like a fun little collage. So that's the Tableau conference. Other upcoming events. So tomorrow, Continuous Technologies is having their like monthly data meetup, so check that out. And then Tableau actually has 2 different events coming up this month that also seem really valuable. So Women Leading Through Change in Government, and the business impact of embracing a data culture. So I guess keep those on your radar. You may be wondering what's next for the TUG. Well, 2020 is reaching an end. So we don't have any more meetings after today, either on the books or scheduled for 2020, but we are, to Crystal's point, earlier today, we do have plans for, or we're starting to make plans for 2021. So if you have ideas or you want to participate or, I mean, anything, email us or Slack us and let us know what you want to see. I mean, we kind of put together meetings based on what we think y'all want to see, but we can guess or you can just tell us. So let us know. And that brings us to our hiring manager panel. So I'm actually going to turn it over to Olga, who's going to lead the panel.
Awesome. Thanks, Brandy. Good afternoon, everyone. We are fortunate enough to have some familiar faces, probably to many of you, as well as someone who was awesome to, who was able to Tableau. So I'm going to briefly introduce the panelists, and then we'll be hearing from them as well, an introduction from them. First, we have Lisa Perry from MGIC. MGIC has been a great partner for the TUG, multiple times hosting, presenting. They have sent many people to the national conferences. We've had a great time with them there. We next have Mike Kirtley, again, really good friend of the TUG, many times have hosted. The last time that was a great new space. Mike has also joined many of his colleagues at the national conference and have had a good time with that group as well. And then I thought, well, MGIC is great, Manpower is great, these Milwaukee companies are great, but whose dream job would be to work for Tableau, right? So another friend of the TUG, Sandlin, who has spoke before at the TUG, and her colleague, Eleanor Bell, she's reached out to her. Eleanor is part of the Customer Solutions Analytics and Insights at Tableau. And I actually went through kind of her resume, previous jobs, and it looks like she was an analyst for the Bill and Gates, or the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, which I don't know, maybe that's a dream job. I think it is. So anyway, thank you all for being here. And if you wouldn't mind, Lisa, Mike, and Eleanor, could you all just introduce yourselves, let us know about your company a little bit and what you do there, and how about a little story about how you fell into data? Lisa, could you kick off?
Sure. So I'm Lisa Perry, and MGIC, the company that I work for, is a mortgage insurance company. And we have been around for over 60 plus years, and we were the first and we are the largest mortgage insurance company in the US. Our founder actually founded the industry of mortgage insurance. How did I get into data? Well, it was actually by happenstance. I started at a mortgage company and I worked there for 11 years doing a lot of different roles. And one of my former bosses called me and said, "Hey, would you like to learn how to use a software called SAS?" And I said, "Sure, why not?" So I went over to the mortgage insurance company and learned how to program in SAS, and have been involved with data ever since. I'm not going to tell you how many years ago that was, though.
Yeah, you're a quick learner. All right, Mike?
Hello, my name is Mike Kirtley, and can you see me? I don't know. I don't know if you need to. So I work for Manpower, and we're a global leading company of innovative workforce solutions. So we do staffing services and lots of different outsourcing, recruitment process outsourcing, temp services, professional services. So we run the whole gamut. And I started my career with Manpower Group doing databases like access databases. And through that, I've kind of grown up and started using Tableau and some other tools pretty extensively, and we've grown into what we're sort of doing now as a team of, across Manpower and Experis lines of business. And I think, there's a team of maybe 15 people that we work with. So I'm glad to be here and happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Awesome. And Eleanor.
Hi, I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for having me. So I'm Eleanor Bell. I lead the analytics team at Tableau in the customer solutions group. So what that means is we're basically Tableau at Tableau. So it's very meta. And my team basically helps the customer solutions team provide excellent customer success and support with data. I actually led the BI team at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and stood up a data science function there. And that's when I first became a Tableau enterprise customer. So we actually stood up an entire Tableau program, did training and all that. So that was super fun. Fell in love with the product. And now I'm just delighted to be at Tableau. And how did I get into data? My freshman year of college, I took an introduction to sociology class. And we had to read all the classic theorists, but we also had to learn how to write code in SPSS, do a correlation analysis and test hypotheses. And I was pretty much hooked right then, figuring out how to translate an idea into a hypothesis and then into data to test it. And I've pretty much been doing that my entire career. So again, way long ago, I'm not going to tell you when.
Thank you. Awesome. So thank you all for being here. Hopefully we have questions coming in from the members. This is a great opportunity to find out what hiring managers are looking for, or maybe, find out some of the funniest stories that they've had. I'm going to go ahead and kick it off. And I guess a timely question would be, in the virtual world that we're in now, how is recruiting going and how is interviewing going? I assume that you're interviewing over Zoom or some kind of platform. What are the differences? Can you still get the feel for the person if that person's not really there? So I guess I'd like to hear that from each of you, and then we're going to monitor the Q&A and find out what questions are coming through. So Eleanor, do you want to go ahead and start?
Yeah, sure. I've actually, I staffed up my team at the beginning of this year, and I've onboarded 4 people virtually. So, and one of those folks I interviewed and recruited because he's in Singapore. So the actual job role was in Singapore. So, so in a way, all what happened when we got sent to work remotely because of COVID is I just accelerated my, everything's virtual. I'm on an interview loop for a different role at Tableau next week after next. So in many ways, we're following our standard process, which for me is I get real clear about what is it that I'm looking for, and I actually assign to each of the interview folks, things to focus on. I think that's super important because whether it's in person or on video, if you're not clear about, what it is that you're actually looking for and what skill set that particular person is asking about, it's really easy to do things like let a technology glitch get in the way, or if it's in person, let your feeling good about somebody actually become unconscious bias towards them, right? And so I think following best practices of behavioral interviewing is that's what we do. And I think that really helps, whether it's in person or online interviewing.
Awesome. So you've not slowed down your hiring during the...
We had a pause in our hiring. I fortunately filled all my positions before that happened, right. But we're now we're opening up again gradually based on, they're looking at revenue numbers and stuff. But yes, we're starting to open back up again and hire.
Okay. Mike, how's the virtual world going for you?
Yeah, so the big COVID change really just sort of turbocharged the change to virtual. So a lot of what we were doing was virtual already. We've got people on the team that are in different states, working remote. Because the technology now that everybody's sort of forced to be remote, we're actually working in better cadence with each other because everybody's part of that virtual team and the IMs and the chats and all that sort of thing. But as far as interviewing and things like that, it's made it a lot more convenient because we don't have to schedule time in the building and worry about sort of traffic and all these types of things. So it's really a good way for people to be more honest in how they are approaching the interview. People feel like it feels to me like they're more comfortable and even confident when it's virtual because they're in their own space. It gives you a little more insight into how that person may behave and how what their working sort of environment looks like. Before we were in this sort of cubicle farm, so there's a bunch of distractions there. So now folks have a chance to be immersed in their own distractions, if it's children or life or whatever. It's just an interesting move to the future. So COVID's kind of propelled us into where we are now.
Awesome, thank you. Lisa, how's the virtual world going for you? And have you noticed, one of the questions came in, have you noticed a drop in employee turnover during the pandemic? And again, how have you adjusted to virtual, particularly in your hiring role?
I would say that our company adjusted really well to working virtually. We didn't have a ton of virtual work prior to the pandemic, but within a couple days, the entire company was up and running virtually. So we had the capabilities, we just didn't have a lot of people working that way. Now, since the pandemic, we've been able to open up our abilities in hiring, meaning we can have folks that don't work in Milwaukee because we're more open to remote work. That makes our hiring pool a lot larger. We've been hiring a lot. I haven't had a ton of turnover on any of my teams that I can recall, but it's been interesting. A funny story is I had one gentleman come into an interview and he couldn't get his front-facing camera working, but he couldn't figure out how to talk to the front of the computer and show his face on the back of the computer. So he kept turning his computer from side to side to talk and then to show his face in the interview.
Okay, so he's okay with adversity or flexible, or there's some
I don't know, but it was getting me a little dizzy.
Oh, okay, well, that's another thing. Okay, another question that came in, which I've been reading some studies or some anecdotal information, is now that we've proven that people can work well virtually, and I think most of the polls that I've heard is that productivity is as good or better in this pandemic world and virtual world. What do you think will happen after the pandemic? Do you believe that people will want to, or that the company will want people to work remotely? And then Lisa, just what you said, you don't have to limit yourself now to Milwaukee. So my assumption is if you're looking for people outside of Milwaukee, you would keep those roles outside. So Mike and Eleanor, Mike, what is your environment going to be like, do you believe, after the pandemic? And
I'm very hopeful, right? I'm hopeful for the sort of flexibility that we've got right now. I like that we would be able to hire people outside the local market. But at the same time, I think that flexibility we've shown of being highly productive while we are able to work from home. There are certain people, me for one, who do miss being in an office environment. So what I'm hopeful for is that we give people a choice, especially the people we hire, we trust, we have an inherent trust in them that they're working with us and for our company. So that trust sort of cascades down to where we would allow them to make the choices that they want to have. Some folks want to go back to the office to escape their basements. Other folks would prefer to stay remote. And, we've been able to keep some people in role because we've allowed that flexibility to work from another state and things like that. So I'm hopeful that, you know, we'll be able to retain the best talent, and not only that, but attract the best talent, but at the same time, give people the flexibility of if they want to be more in that office environment, they are able to.
Great. Thank you. And then Eleanor, so it looks like, which I thought would happen, there are some members that would be interested in working for you or for a team at Tableau. So they did ask, you know, when they're looking at job postings at Tableau, how would they know which, I guess, what kind of functions the team serve? For instance, you just said that you're kind of analytics within Tableau, or your Tableau group within Tableau.
Mhm.
Yeah, how does that look?
Yeah, so Tableau has a, probably not too surprisingly, a distributed analytics function. So what that means is there's analytics teams that are embedded within the various organizations. So there's a marketing analytics team, there's a people analytics team, finance analytics, me, there's sales, and product development. I don't think they actually have an analytics team that I know of. And then there's a central, you know, enterprise-wide analytics team that we all partner with. So it's a little bit of a hub and spoke model. So if you're interested in, and of course, everybody at Tableau actually uses Tableau, but the folks who are in those analytics teams, like that's our full-time job. And we build data sources, we're doing prep flows, we're building measures. And so we're sort of like the official folks who are producing like a business performance measures. I've got data scientists, data engineers, data analysts, and program managers. So those are sort of the job titles that you would see. And I would look for anything with analytics in the job description and the job title. I mean, then you might, some of the jobs that show up might be on the product development team building the analytics features for the, you know, but then it's going to be software engineer on the analytics product development team, as opposed to data analyst on the solutions analytics team, if that makes sense. So, yeah, so kind of poking around and really looking at that job description and seeing if that, you know, if they're talking about using Tableau, you know, to do analytics, those are the kinds of roles you're looking for.
Awesome. And Eleanor, I don't know if you're able to answer this question, but there was a question that came in, wondering about the pay. So if you're hiring people who are remote, is the pay, does that get kind of in tune with the area where they live? So someone in Wisconsin versus someone in San Diego.
Yeah, it's a great question. Yeah, so we're now part of Salesforce because we were acquired, although I still pretty much operate the way I was before. And we still very much have, I mean, you know, we're sort of figuring out, okay, if sometimes we call ourselves Tabforce, but the Tableau brand is very strong, alive and well, and you know, after the acquisition. But what that means is for compensation, Salesforce, and I think Tableau before it had particular cities where there was a bump up in pay because they were known to be quite expensive, but the rest of the country, it's the same. So there's not like a downgrade in pay, or it's not particular to, you're either, you know, if you're remote in a region, you know, there's a standard pay band for every job. And then if I think it's Seattle and San Francisco are the two that, you know, there's a bump up because of this, of the cost of living in those two areas. There might be one in DC, I don't know. So yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you. Hopefully that answers the question there. And then, so maybe Lisa, if I could go to you. I know hiring in a new position, there's likely a lot of training going on. How is it going to be different, or how is it different in the virtual world where, you know, you may not have a trainer coming in, or what are you doing, I guess, to handle the training program for remote people?
Yeah, we're doing almost exclusively right now one-on-one training with new hires, and setting up a Zoom or a WebEx to walk through things with them, and doing a lot of then giving them tools to learn on their own, and then coming back and reinforcing them with some of the work that we're giving them throughout the training period. So,
right. Has it been a lot of work to rearrange and kind of redo that?
It's different. I mean, some of the tools we're training on now are a little bit different than they were, 6 months ago or a year. So that had to be retooled anyway. So it wasn't it wasn't as bad as I expected it to be.
Good. Yeah, and that seems, luckily we're living in the age that we do. It seems like that's what a lot of people have said. It was a pretty seamless move to the virtual environment, to the remote environment. Mike, how are you doing with new hires, training programs, and so on?
So yeah, for us, we haven't really seen much of a difference. We used to be able to have sort of in-person classroom training where you train a lot of people at once, but I find it a lot more effective to actually have that one-on-one training, which takes place after that. So really, essentially, those like classroom trainings are kind of like hors d'oeuvres, and then you have to have the main course training where the people spend the time. So where we're at now is if we don't even spend that time with that sort of team bonding classroom session, it's kind of like everything's one-on-one, small groups. I think that it's more effective in onboarding people and getting folks where you want them to be in terms of the company culture and things like that.
Right. Okay, awesome. So let's get into maybe some of the qualities or skills that you all are looking for. I guess I have 2 questions. One would be, so what is, I think there's been a lot of changes lately. We saw the modern architecture with Mark and Jorel's presentations. What is the hardest position to fill? So, is it on the front end with the dashboard design? Is it a data engineer person? Actually the names of positions are changing as the tools and the ways of getting things done and the data is changing. So for each of you, Eleanor, what is the hardest position to fill?
Data engineer.
Okay, yep.
Yep. That's the last one I got hired.
Okay. And why do you think? Do you think it's maybe, is that a position that used to be many positions, or what is the reason, do you think, that it's harder to get?
I'm not totally sure. I've been in this business for a while and I've hired many data engineers and data analysts and data scientists. I mean, if I had to hire data scientists right now, maybe I would say that, but I hired that. I got a data scientist in pretty early. So for me, it's often about the network and going to like job fairs at the University of Washington, although I'm not doing that now. So I have to find remote job fairs. So I think that, it's a hard to find skill set and it's very much in demand. So for me, I was competing with other companies for that.
Well, and I think, personally, I think data engineering and all that is amazingly cool, but it might be that with the, Tableau and other tools, that's kind of where the cool stuff is maybe happening, or where maybe people think the cool stuff is happening. Data scientists, that's pretty cool as well. So, and Mike, what is the hardest position that you're finding to fill?
Yeah, I agree too. The data engineering part is the bread and butter of the whole operation. If you don't have that right, everything else is going to be impacted heavily by it.
Yeah.
A lot of the other skills, you mostly want to get people that are creative and outside of the box thinkers that can figure out ways and ask the right questions and tell the right stories. But when it comes to the technical skill of being able to sort of weave together multiple different types of data elements and environments, that's where the technical prowess and expertise comes in handy, and also the track record of having been able to do it successfully. That's where it's really competitive. But at the same time, there's so many new types of software. 3 years ago, we weren't talking about Snowflake, right? So things continue to change very quickly. So if folks get in and start to really understand in closely how some of these systems work. I think that that's going to be valuable down the road, because they are all kind of like cousins of each other. If you ask me, they're very interrelated. It's just there's new capabilities and it's going to continue at that hectic pace that it's at right now.
I would agree. Yeah. Lisa, are you going to make it unanimous here?
I am. I think that is, I would agree with everything that they've said.
Yeah. Yeah. It's tough. And I was incredibly lucky. We hired at the very end of the year a data engineer for us, and everything that we do, nothing could be done without the expertise that she brings. And I'm so grateful to have someone that knows has the history, but also is researching like crazy to get the newest and the latest and the greatest. And, you know, how does it Snowflake interact? Yeah, it's just, it's so good. And I don't know.
I would add that, you know, a lot of lower skilled folks can also do the data engineering. A lot of that hard work that can be done sort of when you talk about enterprise scale data engineer, that's one thing. But folks that are Tableau analysts or, you know, using the new Tableau data prep tool, like you can get the foundational information of what that data organization and database architecture will look like or should look like, especially if you start simple. And then you just kind of scale that out and think about different ways, what should be facts, what should be dimensions, how could I make this data be more efficient and return quicker. So I'm not trying to dissuade anyone or disencourage anyone. Definitely, if you buy the Tableau stack, you're going to have tools that are going to enable you to make those future leaps.
Right. So that there's not enough data engineers, there's still some help out there in the tools.
Yeah, I have 4 analysts, and they all basically play into the data engineering space. And then when I hire the data engineer, it's great because I essentially have a working prototype to say, okay, you know, this is now in prep and we've pushed prep to its limits. So we actually give feedback to the product dev team saying, hey, we're break it here, could, you know, log bugs. But it can really help the data engineers. Like, you don't need as many because you've got these more technically proficient analysts who are kind of able to talk to them and explain, you know, what they're doing, and it brought our data engineer up to speed faster. You know, so yeah, it's really helpful.
Yeah,
there's more and more, I think, overlap between the analyst, the data scientist, and the data engineer.
And the analysts are usually the folks working with the business and the users and understand how the data is captured, what the flaws are. A data engineer is not going to know that, especially when they're first hired. So all these things feed into those bigger processes. So, you know, you can't have one without the other. A lot of folks on our team, we think of them as like artisans because they have to do it all. They have to go figure out where the data comes from, work with the users, cook it up, whip it up into usable data for modeling and things like that. And then they also are responsible for spinning out a dashboard for the end users to use. So they have the entire process. So that's why when we look for folks, we look for creative folks that can pick up things and aren't so focused on, I'm really great at SSRS, because that's just not going to do it. Things move too quick. We can't get locked into a specific skill set.
Yeah, I have so many more questions, but I'm going to go to the panel or to the members here, and then I'll come back to my. So let's talk about the analysts. These, you know, our Tableau members, the experts on the visualizations. What does a Tableau certification mean to you when someone's looking for the analyst position? And let me see, I think there's someone else here. And if you see that maybe someone isn't necessarily an expert in Tableau, but they've had extensive, I guess they've used maybe Power BI or Click or some other solution, you know, how do you look at that? So kind of on both ends of the spectrum. Lisa, what do you think?
Well, I mean, I think the certification tells me that they've been willing to, you know, put themselves out there and learn a lot more about the tools that they're using and made the extra effort to get the certification. Because we use many tools, certification in, you know, it's a good thing to have. It's kind of like showing me that they've gone that extra mile. I forgot the last part of your question.
Let's see. So, I guess just what about the people that are experts in Power BI? And
I think, you know, being expert in one visualization tool over another, I think there's a lot of pros to having some wide variety of knowledge coming into your business. But it's really all about how are they able to tell the stories, and how conceptually are they able to take those business questions that are being asked and turn them into something that's actionable on the back end.
Absolutely. Mike, what do you think about certifications? And what if someone's coming to you that's an expert in Power BI?
Certifications are great. That really reflects on the person's, you know, interest in using Tableau as a tool. We've hired folks that were chemists that had no certifications of any kind. I think they're great if you're doing it for you, but if you're doing it as a gateway into a job, I don't know if it's going to be all that you need, because it is not only about making a dashboard or knowing how to geocode something in a Tableau map. It's also about the full experience. Are you going to be able to get the data, analyze the data, come up with a story, and then give folks actionable advice on what they need to do next, or enable them to take action that's necessary to move the business forward? So I would definitely not dissuade anyone from certifying. I think that's a great way to sort of firm up your knowledge base and to know everything. But it's not a game changer. It's not a deal breaker for us.
Right. So Eleanor, I guess I'd like to ask the same question, but I'd also like to think about, I would agree that really the analyst needs to tell that story. He needs to get the insights and tells that story. But how do you know if someone can do that? You know, we have viz competitions, and it's really cool to get that information in a small amount of time, but it's kind of like troubleshooting. How do you really know that someone can do that?
Yeah, well, I can tell you. So first of all, not surprisingly, well, I've been at other companies with all the tools. I only have one tool here, and that's fine with me. Like, we don't use Power BI. But I actually just hired somebody in January or February who I took from Microsoft, who she'd never worked with Tableau before. And she didn't have certification. But so what I do in my interviewing is we give them a data set ahead of time. And we give all the candidates the same amount of lead time, and we ask them to come in with a viz and talk us through their thinking about what did they learn from the data, you know, and we usually throw some things that we know are maybe a little bit of a red herring, or, you know, something, and you know, this person, you know, showed us that she understood data. She learned Tableau enough to do that. She didn't know prep, but that was okay. Like, that wasn't part, you know, but we will give things to, like, and it's like, then we want to think, you know, I think it was Mike who said their creativity, like, are they thinking kind of holistically? Do they come in with questions, right? That's almost more important. And I want to see their thinking than if somebody, you know, just like, give me the specs and I'll build you an amazing dashboard, fine, but that's not actually what I want. I want someone who will challenge the thinking of the business, because 9 times out of 10, they don't actually ask for what they need.
Right. Lisa, what do you, I think there's a lot of analysts out there that can produce a great dashboard, and maybe we're all kind of used to showing what is. How do we move, or how have you tried to move towards hiring people that can show you some real analytics or insights of the data? So I feel like historically there've been a lot of, we follow the BI curve and it's descriptive, and then you go to, you know, all the way up to predictive. have you seen a movement that is going more towards somebody who can do the analytics as well?
I would say absolutely. I think that, you know, it's great to see a dashboard that's monitoring, you know, say some metrics, but to understand why the metrics might be showing the values that they're showing, or being able to tell the story behind how, you know, what's impacting those metrics and how you might change the results of those metrics by doing some, you know, changing a business process or
Right.
tweaking something in your process. Those are the things that people are really looking for. And those are what's going to bring the value of the analytics back to the business.
Right.
So it's extremely important for everybody to be taking that route and trying to figure out the why and what to do from everything that we're trying to measure.
Okay. Mike, what do you think? Have you noticed that that movement, that people really are not just wanting to see what's going on, but truly wanting to make decisions based off the data, which they say they do, but you know.
Yeah, I don't know that I've seen a real change. I think you have different constituents in the highly matrixed organization where some folks come at you and say, I need these columns and it needs to be this deep and I want that and get it off to me. But that's not really strategic. You're not really providing any value. That should be some sort of self-service report query where the value is where they say they want a ham sandwich. And then we talk to them and we figure out they want a turkey dinner, and we would have spent a lot of time making the sandwich when we need to roast a turkey. So that's why we need the folks that can sort of be upfront, understand what the constituents are looking for, and deduce it and then get them what they really need to solve their problem, as opposed to just doing what they ask for. Otherwise, you're going to do it 5 times and make 10 sandwiches. And they're like, the sandwich was just not right. It wasn't right. It wasn't right. But really, they wanted the turkey with the mashed potatoes.
It's not fair because like it's getting near dinner time, so you shouldn't be talking like that. But yeah, so I have one question that I will maybe, Eleanor, you can take this question. So Natalie wants to know, when you're hiring someone, are you looking more for a business use case visualization or creating a data model to forecast what could happen going forward?
That's a great question. It probably depends on the role, right? So I have a relatively small team. I have 9 folks. And so for each new hire, I'm thinking about like, who do I have? What are our needs? I mean, for me, both of those are really critical. So I have data analysts who are more like business facing and sort of almost like analytics business partners is how I frame them. And I would say they're more on the business use case and, you know, trying to really like that. I love that turkey dinner versus a sandwich. That was so perfect. So, but, you know, I'm coaching my folks on how do you piece that apart? Because I've got some junior folks who haven't done a ton of that. And so we're trying to skill up in that regard. In terms of the data model, that's sort of almost where you're getting closer to the data scientist or data engineer space, right? So I've got an analyst who is pretty technical and really likes to hang out there. And so when I put together my team, you know, we help each other out, right? Because you never get one person who does everything perfectly. That's the lovely thing about having a team. There are folks at Tableau who are single, like analysts who are embedded in a business unit and don't have any analytics teammates. And they're the ones who kind of have to have the entire like soup to nuts skill set, except almost nobody does, right? So you're going to play to your strengths. And if your strength is building a data model, then that's what you're going to do more of usually. So, you know, I would say it depends. Those are both really important though, because if you think about a data model, like fundamentally, especially a conceptual data model is just how do these entities relate to each other and what questions can I ask from connecting them, right? And so I to me, they're very close but it's like one brain thinks one way and another brain thinks another way, and I want all those brains on my team.
And depending on what you need. And I think, you know, I love Venn diagrams. I think the people in the group, it's just a bunch of linked Venn diagrams of
Yes.
what you might be good at or what you might really like and be interested in. So, I mean, I love being part of a BI team because of that, because there's so much teamwork going on, and everything somebody can do to better a model is going to make your visualizations fly off, you know, fly or do whatever it needs to do that much better. So I have a question that I'm wondering about. When I was in a BI team, we had an opening for someone that was a team member just like myself, and our manager would write up that position, what is needed, what you'll be doing, and so on. And I looked at it, I'm like, is this for this position? So I think maybe a lot of times they have a lot of wishing going on. So what would you say to someone that looks at this incredible job opportunity, and you know, if it was me, I only have half the qualification and half the experience, and yet I'm doing a pretty good job according to, you know, my performance review. So Lisa, what do you say? What should somebody do when they look at that?
Well, I mean, I think that there's a big wish list going on when we put the job descriptions out there, because if we can find the unicorn, we want it, right?
Right.
But I think that, you know, from a practical standpoint, if you feel like you have all of the drive to meet those requirements, and you have, you know, some of those, I would say still apply, have the conversation, convince me as the manager why I should take you, even though you don't meet every single requirement that I have listed there.
Right. Thank you. What do you think, Mike?
Yeah, I think that in some cases, especially for folks that are looking for work, it's really important to understand that in some of these larger organizations, the people writing the JDs, the job descriptions, may not have any understanding of what the technical work actually is. So try not to let that totally kill your dreams, right? So like no one's been doing, like, I'm just gonna pick on Snowflake. No one's been doing Snowflake for 15 years. So if it says that, people are crazy, right? So you see these kinds of things, and I think if you have a good feeling that you meet part of the qualifications or on your way to having more expertise in one area or another, I would still try to get through that hiring process to sort of get to someone that can actually evaluate you on what you offer the company. And you know, it's really important to, when you are interviewing or talking to these companies, to really understand what the job is. So don't sell yourself short. If you end up in a job where you're just making spreadsheets that are 6 columns wide and 400 columns deep, you're going to be dissatisfied. You're going to be unhappy. So make sure you ask the right questions. What we look for are people that are asking the questions. They ask why we're doing something. They don't want to waste their time. They're interested in learning. They're always wondering what's next. So I think these are the things that will help you succeed.
Okay, great. So we are going to be wrapping up shortly. If anyone else has.
Can I just add one thing to that? Sorry, but there is data that show that women in particular tend to take themselves out of the running. So this is for all the women there. And, you know, I'm not against men. I want to be clear. But what Lisa said, I only have 50%. Like, it's that's actually been shown that if women will self-assess, and if they only have 50% of the qualifications, they won't apply. And so I would strongly encourage anybody who's interested in a job posting that you think you might be able to do, even if you have to grow into it, don't take yourself out of the loop or of the running. Let them do that for you.
Yeah, and thank you, Eleanor. I also read that research, and I was shocked. I think it was higher than 50% that the women had, and I think it's very low that men thought they should go for it. So I think it is more the attitude. And what I've learned is, boy, if you have analytic skills and you know how to apply them, you can learn the tools. You can,
totally.
The business, you can learn the tools. But if you have a drive there, you know, you just need to be that good team member that can express your drive. So we do have to wrap up. Is there any, I guess I'll ask each of you, Mike, I think you already kind of gave some input as to your best advice when people are coming looking for an analyst job. What's your best advice? Is it about preparation? Is it about certification? Lisa, what is the best advice for the members out there looking for a job with MGIC?
I would say be open and agile when you're talking about what you know and what you're willing and prepared to learn. Show that you really want to learn and grow, and just broaden your skills as everybody as you're going through the interview process.
Awesome. Eleanor, what are your words of wisdom?
Yeah, well, ditto to everything they already said. And like, I'm always like, I like it when people ask me questions in interviews. Like, are they demonstrating a sort of a curiosity about, like, what is the bigger problem that my team is trying to solve, or that the bigger group that I'm in, and can they translate that into, how might they think about it again? So I think, and really think about what you love doing and be clear about that. So, because I want somebody who wants to come to work every day and help me solve. We have some pretty gnarly problems. So,
yeah. And Mike, any additional words of wisdom for me?
Yeah, I think everyone on the panels done a great job of expressing, like, don't give up, don't sell yourself short. Try for that job. A lot of the folks that you'll be interviewing with maybe don't have that computer science background. I'm from art and photography background, so people do different things and they end up in different spots. So follow your passion and try to stay positive and optimistic.
Awesome. Thank you so much. The three of you have really, I think, answered a lot of great questions, a lot of great insights, and my assumption is that you've inspired some of us to, if we're looking for something cool and exciting, if we're not there already, that maybe they're going to give you a call or look you up.
LinkedIn, baby.
Right now. What's that?
LinkedIn. Use your network.
Okay,
that's the other piece of advice I would say.
Otherwise, I'd be talking to all of you. So again, thank you so much. Hope you can join us in future meetings. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Brandy.
Thanks for having us.
Yep, thank you.
Bye.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Olga, and to all of our panelists. I mean, how awesome was that? I feel like that's fantastic. And Michael actually just wrote in the chat, like, he's interested in that literature, right? About, I think he's referring to, women maybe not applying for a job unless they meet, an X percentage of the qualifications. So if anybody has a link to that, if you could post it in the chat, I think a lot of people would love to read on that and educate themselves. Yep. So I thought that was great. I mean, there were just so many, too, like the certification versus, maybe I threw out the idea of, like, maybe building like a portfolio of, maybe demonstrating your work and what you can do and how you can tell that story. Tableau Public's free, so you can do that, no problem. So anyway, fantastic panel, absolutely wonderful. We are now going to our next segment, which is with Tableau Zen Master, Ann Jackson. She's not from the Milwaukee area, unfortunately, but she was the first person that came to mind when we were putting together this meeting. The theme of the meeting is advancing your career with Tableau. And, we thought, what about doing like a build your resume in Tableau? And if you haven't checked out Ann's resume, she'll show it to you today, but it was just phenomenal. And we reached out to her and she was available. So she is joining us today to talk a little bit about what that process was like to build a resume in Tableau. So I'm going to turn it over to Ann.
Thanks, Brandy. First, I'll just say I'm really excited to be here. I was telling the team earlier this morning that this is the first thing I've been able to say yes to in a while. So I had a lot of enthusiasm coming out here just with how crazy, everyone's worlds are this year. So I'm really excited to be here. Kind of the heart of where I started in the Tableau community is actually with user groups. So I always love making time for user groups. It was the first place I found peers that used Tableau. So the topic of a Tableau resume, I'm going to share some things, but before I do that, I want to talk about this in terms of what it was from a project perspective. So I've been in the Tableau community for a long time, and one of the things that was always kind of out there is this idea of a Tableau resume. I think I probably saw my first Tableau resume in like 2015, and I would consider myself like an extreme noob at that point. Like I knew nothing. I was, completely out of the loop. I don't even think I'd gone to a user group at that time. And I saw a Tableau resume, and it was one of those things that I always wanted to do. I thought they were really cool, a really great interactive way to communicate yourself to your end audience and to make something for yourself. That said, I didn't actually make my Tableau resume until 2018. So this is something that can take a long time. I hope that your takeaway is not, hey, 3 years from now I should have a Tableau resume, because I hope I'll be able to kind of accelerate that initiative from your end and give you some sticking points on how to do that. But it's worth saying that it's something you've thought about in the past. I'm with you in terms of it taking some time to figure out what the right thing is to do. So I'm going to start sharing some stuff and kind of just talk about the evolution of my resume, and then I'm going to get into like the nitty gritty of how I actually built it. So let me start by actually sharing something which I've not shared with a lot of people in the world other than potential hiring managers, which is my actual paper or soft copy resume. This is how I would typically start demonstrating who I was to whoever was going to try to hire me. I will kind of preface and say, I haven't really talked about what I do. So I actually run my own consulting firm. So I'm the owner, the managing director. I am an analytics evangelist. You can kind of see that there. So right now I kind of am a boss for myself. So thankfully I haven't had to write a new resume. This one's from last year. So it's pretty current, but I'm pretty fortunate at this point to kind of move past that. But this is the resume. This structure is what I have used throughout my entire professional career to communicate and articulate who I am. And so there were some things about this resume in particular that I really wanted to bring to the digital domain. And I would love to hear any sort of like feedback as you guys see this in the chat of like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this is how it is. It worked well for me. Probably almost every single job I applied to, I got. So I hope that means something, but it's a very small sample, so you never really know. The things I like about this resume and why I chose this format is on the first page, from my perspective, you get a clear sense of who I am. So I wanted to take the time to have a bio that said, who am I? And this is my opportunity to explain professionally what it is that I am trying to do or trying to be. At some point, this, instead of my bio, was like my professional objectives. Like I literally have a version of this resume that's like, I want to become an analytics evangelist. Like that is what I am hunting for. And then it kind of delves into the proficiency section. So, okay, what are the nitty gritty skills that I have? I chose to take this and kind of bucket it. You think about us being in the data realm, a lot of what we do is data organization. And so this is my attempt at organizing some attributes, especially because there's a lot of attributes for any of us in some sort of analytical and data profession, to explain those and kind of segregate them into kind of key themes. And you'll see that in my digital resume. And then the rest of it, we've got kind of the basics. So my education, which obviously needs to be there. And then my career accomplishments was something that I always kept on the front page, because these are good talking points, at least from my perspective, when I was talking to hiring managers, to kind of explain a problem and how I solved it. And then you get to the nitty gritty of what I did for every single job. And this page right here, this is what I think most people think about when they're thinking about a resume, and where you spend a lot of time and energy putting the right bullet points, putting the right amount of information there. And the fact that this is kind of a giant text wall makes it really challenging to take it from text wall to some sort of visual representation of your resume. And I think this part is probably what got me kind of stuck in the beginning of trying to understand how I put this in there, but recognize that I don't have as much space in a Tableau dashboard to be able to do that. And I also wanted to make sure that the front page really still shone through. So let me go ahead and transition over to, I'll start with Tableau Public and say, when I built this resume, this was just for me. Like I told you guys, I didn't have any intentions or desires to make it something that people like looked at. It was purely for me. It was a very creative and like selfish project that was like, I should have a Tableau resume. I've been around long enough that this is something that I should do. And if I don't do it, I almost feel like I kind of look lazy or something. It's like, you've done enough things where this should be something pretty easy for you to do. And afterwards, I actually was looking at the stats today, and you can see, my Tableau Public profile is very prolific. It's a long, long history of 261 visualizations that I've put together over, the beginning of time. But it's actually my most favorited Tableau viz on Tableau Public. And I never intended on having something that's kind of personal, my resume, be so prolific. So it's definitely an unintended consequence and byproduct of this whole experience. And one of the things that actually happened is that I see it in LinkedIn a lot. I see it probably, I'll say once a quarter, maybe biannually, where I'll see a picture of my resume, like, oh, that's my face. It's my face on some sort of like initiative on an academic program or something to do with a Tableau resume. So it's interesting that it's kind of morphed into something that has continued to grow. And it's something that, I built 2 years ago and it's still with me. So with that, I'm going to kind of get into what this is and kind of what I thought about whenever I was building it. So I gave you the foundation of my physical resume, of the way I thought about organizing information about myself. A couple of things that you should know about me, and it probably articulates itself in the design and style, is I'm kind of a minimalist, especially when you think about dashboard design, and I wanted that to be a part of what I was doing here. I am someone who likes to put additional information in tooltips. I like for things to be very clearly communicated and very simplified for the end user to see and kind of get more details on demand. So as I was thinking about this process, that was one of the things that I wanted to build in. So when you think about this section in the middle here, I've got all of my various roles in here that have a lot more text in them, but I didn't want that to be, the bulleted list from my other resume. I didn't want that to take up too much real estate, because I thought that there were more important things, specifically that kind of top middle section. So when I broke it apart, you think about my original resume and this, I kind of thought, okay, so I need to clearly show my entire work history, and education is going to be important. Like, we know that I have to communicate some sort of degree if I've got one, whatever that is, I need to put that on there to have that demonstrate things. I mean, sometimes that's kind of a necessity, but I knew that I needed to say where I was from a professional perspective and kind of where I am today. So I knew there had to be something there. And then I felt like I had a lot more real estate to work with these central components. And that probably took the most effort and energy for me to figure out. And then, one of the things that's kind of funny about this is it's a Tableau resume. So I'm kind of self-selecting into the Tableau community. So I wanted to put some things in there that I thought would resonate. That's kind of why the bottom section exists, of like, what is it that I've actually done in the Tableau community? Because I do feel like it's been very instrumental to my own personal and professional growth. And then just some other things that, were valuable to me. I will say that I've seen a lot of other Tableau resumes have, and maybe mine's a little bit too professional in this vein, like it's very polished, but I don't know why I didn't choose to, but I know a lot of people put like their personal interests in there. I think from my perspective, I'm a very like, there's my professional life and there's my personal life. Like, you might see a cat on camera and you'll know that I love cats, but I'm not really like someone who likes to articulate that when I'm talking about my resume. But that said, I think that there's like a perfect opportunity to do that in there, although I didn't choose to do that. So that kind of helped me, like when I was thinking about what this should be and how it should look, it kind of helped me figure out what each of those different components could be. I will say I struggled a lot with just the amount of information with each of these roles and where they should actually come from. So let me show you the actual Tableau workbook. And I'm going to show you actually the data that drives this as well, because one of the other things, at least probably when I was building it is, what does the underlying data structure look like so that it can be set up for you to be successful in building your resume? I built in a lot of things that helped it stay automated. So knowing that I built it in 2018, it was actually kind of easy for me to open it back up and just add a couple things in there. And it's been growing with me over time. Like specifically this bar, that's what am I doing right now? It gets larger every day, it gets longer every day. And I'm not doing anything to update or maintain that, which is actually kind of a nice thing. And I had this sense that I might set it and forget it, but I still wanted it to be relevant. So I tried to think about ways that I could do that. And also kind of play with the data that I had to make it more, you know, we'll say production level. So the data, and you'll see this, everything is driven off of an Excel workbook, and there's a couple different tables. I highlighted the 3 down at the bottom that I ended up with, but the data structure is pretty darn simple for most of them. The way almost every single visualization works in here is with a Gantt chart. Well, specifically this one, having a start date and an end date for your experience. And the same thing is true for the certification up here as well. And there's start dates, or there's actual like event dates associated with the speaking and community participation. So that was kind of the first thing that I wanted to make sure that I got structured down. And the evolution of what my data set actually looked like, you can see it started with this, where I have, is it a job or is it education? And I have my job, my education, then I have certifications, I had awards, I had speaking, and I realized, I think at this point when I got down to speaking, because I'll show you the speaking tab, I'm like, there's way too much here. It just goes on and on and on. And so the fact that it's in the same data set doesn't necessarily make sense. So I actually ended up breaking it out into its own separate list. And also because there are things like, I'll make this a little bit larger for you guys, things like the topic in there that I knew that as I was building out what the visualizations were, that I wanted to have more information that didn't necessarily port back to the data structure that was there for my real jobs, right? So this is, again, this is what's underlying it. So you'll take, you know, here's my first job of record. It's actually not my first job. There's my first retail job. I think somewhere down there, you guys can probably see it. Here's my math degree. But I started by just doing the start and end dates and putting those things in place. And then I spent a lot of time focusing on the detail. And I knew I had a lot of opportunity there to add more information as I wanted to go along. And I really didn't want to hold back on the data that I put into this. I wanted to make it sort of a catalog of everything that I've done, because we could always filter it out, right? I can always filter it on the dashboard. So I did also take approach of do it once, and then if you don't use that information, that's fine. You've cataloged it. Because some of this stuff, you know, could take a little bit of time to figure out how many user groups have I actually gone to over the, you know, my entire life thinking about Tableau. That's a lot. So this is, again, the underlying data structure, and it works out really well. When you're working with Gantt charts in particular, and this middle section is a Gantt chart, we've got our start date as the mark. You can see we've got a Gantt mark here. It's already set to automatic. And then I've got one calculation driving the width of the bars, or what we would call size in Tableau, obviously. And that is just looking at the date difference between what is the start date and what you would think would be the end date. But as I went through this, I actually realized that I didn't want to have an end date for my current job. That's the lazy part of me. So I built another calculation that says, hey, if it's my current job, then let's just use today as my end date. And that makes sense, right? So that bar will grow over time. It'll be more days as time goes on. But that's all that's really done here to craft basically the width of each of these bars, and for everything to line up quite nicely. There's probably a little bit of data trickery happening in the underlying data to make them butt up so seamlessly, right? I was pretty, you know, authentic to trying to get, you know, start and end dates that matched up. So here's a good example. So 9/1 to 8/31, 8/31 to 2/1. For the sake of the visualizations, I think that's pretty useful to keep it all aligned. And then the data really fed in from there. I kind of chose this bar chart going across the middle because I knew it was something that was going to get longer over time. In thinking about how the data would grow, the horizontal spacing of that information, I realized that if I could have something on like a continuous time axis, that over time I'd be able to still have more pieces in there and have it work with me, as opposed to having something vertical where maybe eventually you'd have to scroll. So I did kind of think about that in terms of, you know, from a future perspective, what needed to happen. The next one I'll talk about is actually this center section, because this one is a little bit different. If you look at the Excel data set, it's this interest section. So I spent a lot of time trying to figure out, okay, so there's all these things, and this kind of aligns to that big bulleted list, and I'll bring it back up, of like everything that Anne can do, right? Like this is everything that I'm good at. And there's just way too much here. There's way too many items for me to somehow put it all into a single dashboard, and for people to really synthesize down what it is I'm trying to communicate to them. Yes, I'm good at LODs. I'm good at, working with multiple databases. I'm, pretty good at talking to people. I like doing project management. I've got experience in these industries, but in the realm of a dashboard, you have way less opportunity to present that information, at least in the text form, because that's not the point. So I really spent a lot of time just kind of typing down things that I liked or were interested in, or like words that I like to say when I talk about myself. And that's when I kind of broke it down into these different things. I forced myself, I don't remember when, but I forced myself to limit it to 5. The 5 seemed to work pretty well, and then they naturally fell into 3 categories. I think the idea of 3 of something, that's a port over from my resume. That feels like a nice holistic number, an approach. And it actually gave me the opportunity. You think about what I do now. I'm in a consulting role, so I work with a lot of different industries. So they're looking for technical know-how, but they're also looking for industry know-how. And I'd say personally for me as a consultant, my personality matters probably more than in some other jobs. So it's kind of important for me to share that as well. So that's why I took this approach of putting in the passion category. So from here, after I chose those different items, I decided to rank them and be pretty honest about the rank and rank them by my proficiency, which I decided to do as well. And I wanted to be pretty authentic here, to not have everything be perfect. I think that's something that we always do, and it's unrealistic. I mean, yes, I think we would all love to think we're that unicorn, and there are some people that are unicorns, but it also kind of demonstrates to me a little bit of vulnerability in terms of, what I've got exposure to, I'm interested in, and how that kind of fits in the realm of what I've been doing, which is kind of a good point, because for me, when I built this originally, healthcare was probably my #1 industry. I should probably update this and put marketing at the very top now. I think the last 2 years I've spent deep in the marketing realm, and this is just kind of is almost foreshadowing what I ended up spending time on. So there was some value in that as well. It's kind of self-selecting my interests. The visualization here is a simple, it's not a lollipop chart. You could probably call this a Cleveland dot plot if we're being specific. So it's just 2 axes. This is a dummy axis that is just the line. And then these are just the dots for the score. I know I've got the axis hidden, so since it's very minimalist, but that's all that this is. The nice thing about working with your own data is you can structure it however you want, and you can hard code it however you want. So that was one of the things that I did, was I actually put the rank in there, so I didn't have to build a table calculation rank function, which might sound kind of silly, but why not? Like the data set's so simple anyway, might as well build that in there to make it easy for you to build out your visualization. I think that this thing altogether probably took me maybe 2 or 3 hours to build. I spent the 3 years leading up to it thinking about what I wanted it to be. And then once I got all the data down, it was really simple to actually put it in there and kind of figure out finishing and polishing touches. I did ask some people for their input along the way, but I found after that I actually just kind of wanted to do it for me, like I said. And so I took some of their input. I used other people's resumes as kind of inspiration, but I made it kind of true to me. So I would encourage you as well to kind of make it true to your own. It's kind of funny, this sheet is still called, it's called Bullets Parentheses 2, which is a terrible name for a sheet in a dashboard, but it's actually a really good example of what I was thinking of whenever I built this. This was, okay, the bulleted section, I need to figure out some way to make this in there. And the design, I think, works well for the center of the page. And this is where I almost anticipate that most people's eyes are actually drawn, but I have, no idea. And then I'll kind of end with, because I want to make sure we have time for questions, the bottom section and the top section. So the bottom section, this was a fun one. Like, there's a lot of data in here. There's a bunch of different things that I've done throughout time. This is, again, a really good representation of my own Tableau journey. And I thought it was kind of critical to be able to put this down there and also be representative of where I've been and where I'm going. And you can kind of see that my interests have changed over time. Very early on in my career, I was spending a lot of time in my local Tableau user group in Phoenix. And then at some point that kind of changed, where I started breaking out of my own shell a little bit, and I became a Tableau ambassador. And I actually did my first presentation at Tableau conference, which was a tips battle, which I won, which I was not expecting, but that was the first thing I ever did in like the Tableau community that felt like really big. And then it kind of spurred on from there, where I've been on this kind of path that has just continued to have more and more things and continue to grow into something more robust. And it's actually been kind of nice for me to look back and say, oh yes, you know, I was doing things this year. You know, I said at the beginning, feel like I've been a little bit heads down this year, but it's like, I'm still doing stuff. You know, there's still things happening, right? So it's a good reminder from that perspective. But this is a very simple concept in terms of a chart. You know, it's just a dot plot. It's just time on columns, right? Like that's all you've got. And then you've got an individual circle for every single one. Dot plots work fantastic when you have dense data. This data is very dense. It's probably the only really color encoded visualization on my dashboard. And this was kind of the fun part about it, of like choosing some highlight colors to represent different things. And I just added on the yellow for Workout Wednesday to kind of differentiate that, because that's something that I haven't done since the beginning of time. It's something that I've been doing for a while now, but it's been just kind of, you know, an addition and an add-on to everything that I have going on. And then the last section up here, so if you're thinking through this, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 sheets. That's it. That's all it's taking to build my resume. And you saw the underlying data, which is pretty darn simple. This is a bar chart. That's it. I wanted to because I feel like it's kind of common practice for people to speak in this language. You know, I meet people and they're like, how many years have you been using Tableau? Oh, well, I've been using Tableau for this many years. So I think that was a common language of something that I wanted to kind of put in there, or a common language around technical tools to put in there. But I made this very small and purposeful around the things that I was actually doing. So this is very similar, where I have the number of years that I'm actually doing something. So this how long calculation, I think that might have been the same name. And it is just a number of years associated with whatever it is that I've got, which for here, this doesn't really matter because it's you know, it's not my current job, but it grows over time. I actually had to adjust this axis. So you can see I'm saying I have 6.8 years of Tableau desktop experience and 5 1/3 year of Tableau server. And then I also thought this was kind of a cool opportunity, because kind of what the panel was talking about in conjunction with it, because I think that I've got a similar mindset around certifications. I wanted to propagate those where I thought they were appropriate. And here it seemed like it was pretty appropriate and there was space to do it. So I actually just added on a nice little line that represents how long or when, if you're thinking about the timeline of things, that I encountered basically the highest certification or proficiency with each one in terms of how it could be measured independently. So if you're looking at this, I've got 6.8 years of Tableau desktop experience, and I didn't get my certified professional until August of 2018. And then you can kind of look at the different time periods from there. So I really like that. That was something that I wanted to somehow, because I thought these are important things for me. I really like what was said on the panel, like people do this for themselves, and I wanted to demonstrate that. I'm proud of my accomplishments. So it was kind of nice to be able to fit that into that little realm and that little bar chart up at the top. The finishing points of this, if you're wondering from a design perspective, these are images that are just hyperlinks, so nothing special there, as is my picture. And then these are blank containers that are just filled in lines. So these are floating over the top. I actually adjusted the length of this. I wanted to do this because it is kind of like a zoom in of where, you know, what I've been up to for the past 4.5 years, and kind of show that in a more zoomed in fashion. So it kind of worked out well from a design perspective in terms of how I could articulate my journey. But that's it. I know I'm a fast talker, so thank you guys for listening to everything that I had to say. But that's really kind of start to finish the entire process. I did write a blog about this a long time ago, which I resurrected in anticipation of this talk, and it's pretty authentic to what it is that I actually shared with you today. I will kind of repeat that this was for me, and I wanted it to represent me. And so I would highly encourage you guys to kind of go that path as well. I think someone asked me kind of in preparation for this, you know, can you give this to someone? You know, can you give your resume to like a hiring manager? And to me, I see it as a companion. I see it as, and that's kind of why from a colors perspective, it kind of aligns is, okay, this is me on paper, and then here's me in a dashboard. Like here's the interactive me. And it's also a great talking point. You can facilitate your way through this and kind of talk about exactly what I spent the past 20 minutes talking about with you on why you did what you did and how you did what you did. And you have something nice representing it at the end. And it's a representation of you if you're doing it the way I did it.
Awesome. And I think people are just absolutely blown away. There are a few questions that I'll throw out at you. Just keeping an eye on the time. We have about 5 minutes left of this meeting. But I guess, first of all, is teal significant? Why teal?
Yes, it is. So I would say it's maybe my favorite color. It kind of oscillates. You know, if you ask like my parents, they'd say it's purple. My first car was purple. But if you think about my current business, I'm looking for a business card, but I don't have one. If you go to the website, it's like black or almost dark black and teal. And that's just a color that I like, that resonates with me. Thinking about the way I wanted to present myself, that was the highlight color. That was kind of like the representation of what I liked. You know, if I were going to choose a highlight color, that was the path. So nothing more significant than I just like it. So why not?
Yeah, well, and to your point, right, it's kind of consistent with your brand, right, with your resume and your website. So it totally makes sense. So I'm going to throw one other question out at you, and then I just have a few more wrap-up slides, but thank you so much for your time today. You know, Ginger asked a question. So when you first started working on your Tableau resume, did you start out by kind of thinking through like visually, like drawing it out on a piece of paper to understand, you know, what you really wanted to show? Like, how did you do that? And I guess, are there any insights into how you actually started doing the work before you figured out what the data structure should be?
Yeah, so I think I kind of started with the hard copy of my resume and trying to pick out the points that I thought were important and really circling them there. And the data structure was iterative to some degree to get the visualizations right. But once I landed on that, I actually think that structure works out in perpetuity. And I outline that in the blog post I have if you guys are trying to kind of reinvent it yourself. It's a good question, and I don't know if I have like the most crystal clear answer. I do tend to sketch out some things, and I think visually I knew there were some key things that I wanted to have explained. I knew there was going to be a Gantt chart in there. There had to be a Gantt chart in there because that's the best way you express things over time. Like it had to be there. So, you know, that was a pretty obvious component. Probably the most creative aspect that I didn't draw up beforehand, and this was just, it looks cute, was that center section with the dots and the ranking, right? I like that section probably the best, but I couldn't have conceptualized that without actually working with the data and putting it in place. But some of that you're seeing is really the art or the practice of, I probably had a list of 50 things, and then I was like, nope, I need to rank these because I can only fit so many. And then I was like, well, I should actually put these into different buckets so I can be more efficient about how I'm actually using that space. And that's what kind of led to that centralized section. So that one was probably the toughest one. That dot plot at the bottom is pretty easy because, you know, you have a ton of things over time, so you might as well just make it a dot. And I love dot plots. They look really pretty.
Yeah, I think it's, I feel like my eyes always gravitate towards that because there are more than, you know, just the black and teal color. But also, I mean, I think it's a really condensed way to like show all of these different ways that you've been involved. So I think that's pretty great. Actually, one final question to you. So I guess how important is it to include like non-work related things? I know you kind of talked about like personal interests, but like maybe things even like volunteer work, right? How might those fit in on a resume?
So yeah, volunteer work, I think, fits in very well. You know, that passion category I have is kind of professionally driven, but I think that there's an opportunity to articulate that in a couple different ways. If I had the chance to redo it, one of the things that is a hobby I've had maybe for the past 3 years with board games. And I think about what board games are and the type of people we were talking about in the panel, that you're interested in problem solvers, strategic people, and that would totally fit in the realm of a resume and explain, you know, a little bit of whimsy, a little bit of fun around you and your personality, but still be relevant. So I think that there's definitely space for that. And the same with volunteering. I mean, anybody who's volunteering is a very empathetic individual who's putting others before themselves. I can't think of a scenario where that would not be something good to include.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you again so much for taking the time to walk us through that. And for you posted the link to your blog post there. So if anybody has any other questions, can they reach out to you on Twitter or LinkedIn?
Yeah, I mean, like, seriously, that link on that dashboard actually goes to my email. So I do read it. Like, it's my email. I read it all the time. You can reach out to me on Twitter. You can connect with me on LinkedIn, but I'm kind of ignoring LinkedIn right now. So if I don't reply to you guys, it is not me not liking you. It is me ignoring LinkedIn. So if you want a quick response, it's email, then Twitter probably. But awesome. Yes, I would encourage you to. And if you have specific questions as well, I'm more than happy to provide additional information. It's one of my favorite things to do, is to guide people and to give them what they want. So please do.
Awesome. Thank you again so much for taking the time today. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.
So we are at time. So this slide here are just some of the extra things that we, as a Milwaukee Tableau user group, are kind of planning for, that we're thinking we might do something to keep this group connected over the winter. But I guess keep your eyes out for emails and information about that. So that brings us to probably, I don't know, for me, it's one of my most favorite parts of our meetings, where we start to give away some swag. And a huge thank you to our sponsor for the meeting, Pan Data Group, Jorel. Just absolutely exciting and wonderful to be able to give away some awesome stuff. So we've got some swag packages and some gift cards. So I'm going to end up picking 4 winners from those people who asked questions. So stand by. So we have 28 people that asked questions, and our first winner is Katie from Rising Tides. Congratulations on winning a gift card. That's the one you win. I'm just kind of going down the line. So we have 2 gift cards to give away and 2 swag packages. So the next person to win is Rob Fowler. Congratulations. You also win a gift card. Our next winner is Tammy Brown. Finally, Tammy wins something. She has been like attending meetings like crazy between the Milwaukee and Wisconsin Tableau user group. So welcome, welcome. And our last winner of the day is Charles Lawson. Fantastic questions from you all day. So congratulations on winning our last swag package of the meeting. I will be following up with you all via email just to get some information so we can send that out to you. So keep your eyes out for that. Yes, Colleen, I will share all of the links from today's meeting in Slack. I probably won't get to it until tomorrow, though, because again, if you've ever attended one of our meetings, we usually have a happy hour at the end. So we're going to shut down this meeting. I'm going to start up this one, the next one, and I'm actually going to share the link in, I don't even know what happened. There we go. Okay. So I'm going to, I'm sharing a link now in the chat window. So if you want to grab that link, we're going to hop over there for just some networking. So join us. Let's talk about everything we learned today. And that was a lot that we learned. I mean, fantastic presentations by Ann Jackson. That resume just blows my mind. The panel, such great advice and so well led. Olga, that was great. Lisa, Mike, and Eleanor, fantastic advice. Thank you so much for taking the time. And then, yeah, Jorel and Mark, I mean, I just felt like there were so many questions that you were able to answer, and I feel like it opened the door to so many more. So thank you all for making this community absolutely wonderful. Let's go have a drink and talk more about it. So thank you all for joining us. See you next time.